I'd probably have to all start for him to knock, right?
I won't be streaming. I'll just be chilling, so you don't have to worry about me.
Okay, that's fine. Oh wait, so there, if you go to Stream Manager, there's just a stream together thing. But this like creates.
It looks like it's like a Discord call type deal.
Yeah, that kind of Discord call. Okay. Strange.
Figure out the knock thing. I don't see anything for it in here. I'm
Maybe
so
you might have to. Are you guys all live? Maybe to be live to do it. I don't know.
yeah, I just went live, and I'm looking at
Let's
40's
see.
channel. He's live, but I don't see any option for it.
I think let me.
Usually, like right where my mouse cursor is like usually where the knock button is. But usually, I don't know, like if it's like delayed. I don't know because we like just went live or some shit.
Okay, so who's else is streaming right now? So I can knock on your thing.
Like everyone.
Everyone. Okay.
I think we all are. Yeah.
/ Manather.
I think I just sent you guys one. Oh no, that's a call.
Here, this
no.
works. Oh,
No.
no, yeah, that's a call.
Yeah, no, this works.
I mean, probably...
No, it like puts you in like a little fake mini Discord call or some shit.
Yeah, you just leave it.
It is weird.
You just join and you don't even need to touch it and it works.
I see.
I think you just minimize it or something.
Yeah, just don't close the tab. That's the most important thing. Okay, legendary. And then put your shared chat thing on. You see like a top right of this like mini Discord call or the shitty call.
Yeah.
Yeah, just have that on.
It looks like the auto put it onto the OBS thing.
Oh my god, my dog is going nuts downstairs.
We can't hear him, so it's okay. Let's see.
Where do you see this knock thing? I'm sorry, I'm so inept.
You should get an invite.
Yeah, so on your if you open Twitch, like any Twitch page, you see where the notifications is, top right? It'll say like someone invited you to collab.
Ooh, Degen wants to collab.
Yeah. Just click that and then you'll join this thing. And then when you join the call on Twitch, there should be shared chat is on or something on the top right.
Yeah, it's good to go.
Okay, perfect. Wait. Lit. Okay. Make sure my audio is working. I had to make a new scene. I've never captured the specific window. Okay.
Oh yeah, you guys, I turned that on already, so.
Yeah, I just put it at the top of my current scene. I didn't give a shit.
I just didn't want to stream like, like a Discord stream. Some person types me something that can be taken out of context or something. Kind of sketchy.
Oh yeah, get doxed real quick.
Yeah. I think your stream has only your voice, Porom, or something. People are typing.
Alright, let's fix that.
Oh my god. So y'all can't hear my dog, but I'm pretty sure it's coming through my mic.
I wouldn't even know you have a dog right now. So, yeah, you're good.
There we go. I think we're good.
Legendary.
All right, 6 boomers versus technology. Who will win?
There's only 5 people on the call. Is the 6th boomer your dog?
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
I'm actually going to close my door real quick.
What's the phrase? Hate to see him leave it and love to watch him go. He couldn't hear, so keep that to ourselves.
Dude, it's so warm here. Fuck. Okay, legendary.
You can't tell, but I'm fucking sweating bullets today.
This is
I
the
got
first
the AC
time.
cranked. I'm still sweating.
This is the first time I've worn a shirt indoors in like 2 weeks, man. I've just been walking around shirtless. It's way too hot to be wearing clothes, but
Waking up at noon and
Yeah.
just sweating all day.
yeah, pretty much, dude. It's crazy. I have like an actual AC thing that cools here, and then I have like a fan in my room. It's so fucking hot. Like the city is not too bad, but my apartment faces the sun, and like where my PC is, it's like I think it's called like a solarium, so it's like all windows around me.
Oh my god.
So like yeah, I'm getting beaten up here by the sun.
You got to
your
get those
poor computer.
reflective strips for your windows.
I have like shitty blackout blinds just to cover the one like behind my monitor, just so that I don't get like the glare. But yeah, it don't work for the heat. I'm still surrounded by sun everywhere else. Oh.
Azuna, did you get the
He's not live. He's just
Okay.
chilling.
No, I'm just chilling. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna change my picture just for this.
Okay, I think we got our topic. Someone just said, "Is Arcane Mage good?" So Porom, you know.
Yeah, what is
2
the
hours,
clean it
meta?
up,
Topic 1.
Yeah, what spec are we playing, guys? Please tell me.
That's
I
actually-
answer this question at least 20 times a day,
Dude,
but it's just like chatters.
I'm pretty sure that like I know a lot of people who have wanted to stop streaming just because of these people who come into the chat and be like, "Hey, what spec is coming next?" You know, like
This is like every WoW streamer who gets this.
it's so AIDS, bro. It's
insane.
so AIDS.
Forgy.
Yeah.
Show talents. Show talents.
Show
please.
talents, please.
Show talents.
Oh my god, dude. Imagine Dreadnoughts turns on his stream like he gets a random guy. Hey, I'm stuck on this quest in Grizzly Hills.
I mean, he'd let himself out.
Man.
I think my favorite is when someone's streaming like M Plus or whatever, and they're asking to like inspect. Can you inspect the Guardian droid? Can you show their talents? What trinket are they running? I don't know. Ask them.
You're like, I almost kicked that guy out of this group, you know? All right, so I think we could probably get going.
Alright,
So first of all, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, squad, for showing up and coming to talk about the 11.2 updates and kind of state of Mage. We're just gonna go through a list of topics that we kind of all slapped together into a document. Starting off with kind of the class as a whole, and then we'll talk more specifically about Frost, Arcane, and then Fire. And then, you know, maybe we'll field some questions and stuff like that if we have time as well. So to kick it off, first things first, Time Anomaly completely ejected out of the class tree, and Inspired Intellect bumped up to kind of compensate for the damage loss, but it still pigeonholes us in the class tree to have to take that talent node for damage, and then, you know, good luck getting displacement or reduced cooldown on Shimmer, right? Personally, I think this is one of the most hollow victories of all time, because for me, the entire problem with Time Anomaly is that like a huge issue of the problem, rather, is how it impacts your class tree choices. I know for Fire, it's a bit more impactful on the RNG swing of things. I'm definitely interested to hear, like, Degen and Forgy, you guys specialize a bit more on Fire Mage, and I'm definitely interested to hear your take on the Time Anomaly removal, because from an Arcane perspective, I kind of don't care. Like, it almost doesn't impact anything I do, and I never really felt Time Anomaly have much of an impact in the first place, so...
yeah, I mean, I guess for the RNG aspect that you kind of touched on for Fire, I think that was my like major thing whenever like you're progging a boss or something. It was extremely frustrating to like have a certain lineup happen and you're like, wow, that felt sick. How can I mimic that? And then you like go through and it's like, oh, I proc Time Anomaly here and I proc Time Anomaly here. And it's like, even if next pull I get 2 Time Anomalies, if they're like badly timed or like they're between 2 different combustions or something like that, the timing is all going to be different, which just creates this really frustrating idea of like, I don't have agency as to where my cooldowns are going to go and how I'm going to actually like, line up things for certain moments in the fight just because of that RNG element. So I'm definitely really glad Time Anomaly is gone. I hate that talent. That was like one of the worst things. I don't know if Degen wanted to add anything about that for Fire.
I mean, yeah, like where I really felt it this year was on Muggsy, where I was trying to line my combust up with the cages, and then I would randomly get a combust proc, and now I have to sit on it for 20 seconds, or I full send, and then I have nothing for the cage. And will my warlock be able to solo it, or and then the other really cursed thing is you set up to do your opener, right? You're precasting that pyroblast, you're about to hit Phoenix Flames, and then you proc combust right on pull, and it just breaks my brain every time. Like I don't know how to fix my brain, but I get that combust and I just like start smacking my keyboard.
It's also, I mean, it's just a victim of the CDR epidemic. Fire has on Muggsy. Like I just gave up. I was trying to like optimize my combust around the cages, and I was like, my combust times would sometimes vary so much. It's like it's just never worth it for me to try holding it for a specific point. I should just always end up saying on cooldown. It just felt bad because normally, there's some agency in how you interact with the fight, and it felt like as Fire, you kind of lost that this year, or just and as we keep going, just because of how much Fire CDR there is. But you said how did it impact Fire? Let's talk about how it impacted Frost. I think that Time Anomaly was actually pretty solid for Frost, mostly because it wasn't. It was the least impacted by any of the procs. Right, when you proc in Icy Veins, it's normally a good thing. When you proc Combust, it was right before your Combust. You were like shit, because now you're gonna lose a bunch of CDR. And when you procced it for Arcane Surge, you're not gonna delay your Surge for this Arcane Surge. You're just gonna overwrite it. And for Frost, it got the like several benefits of you could pre-stack a Death Chill going into your real Icy Vein, so then you could have more spell power going through it. Particularly impactful in single target. And then it also gave you like max stacks of Cryopathy, which is kind of useful now that we have less Fingers of Frost. So in general, kind of nice as Frost, but Time Anomaly RNG, totally fine to see it gone. And I like Porom's suggestion on Max's stream, but.
Oh yeah, getting rid of Inspired Intellect as well and replacing it with Caught PB. I would definitely love that.
I mean, it doesn't make the node any less required from a personal defensive standpoint. Maybe it makes the right or left side less required, right? You're less incentivized to actually need Ice Cold all the time or want to get Mass Barrier all the time. I do think that Mass Barrier is potentially taken, more than it really has to be, but it's just a very nice group defensive to have anyway, even in raid, where it's sometimes I free press it. But
yeah, adding to that, I actually think it would be a really good idea for Cold Snap to find its way into the class tree as well, with that parity in mind. Perhaps as a choice with G-Invis. I think that would be a really good duality there, where you can pick two of the three, right? PB, Cotton, G-Invis, or two of the four, rather. It's funny you guys mentioned Muggsy, because when I actually progged Muggsy as Arcane because we were late enough that like the buffs hit and Arcane was doing really solid at that point. But I remember on Styx having the TA procs happen and offset my timings from ads and stuff like that, and that was just always such a massive headache. So yeah, no, I'm definitely glad TA is gone for good here.
And Azuna probably can chime in more. He's our Mythic Plus boy. I never felt like TA felt bad in Mythic Plus. There was never a bad time for a damage proc in Mythic Plus, because anytime you have damage is a good time. But for scripted raid, it felt bad.
For Frost and Arcane, it kind of just didn't really feel like it did anything. Like the gameplay, it was pretty much unaffected. But for Fire, it sometimes is the difference of just like sending a whole nother combust in a pack, right? And like Fire in Nike is like looking to get like 2 or 3 combusts off a pack. So like sometimes if you do a run, you get 3 combusts in a pack because of this procs, or like sometimes you get 2. It feels kind of frustrating, I think, for Fire at least. But for Arcane, you just proc a random surge. It doesn't really feel like much is going on. But like it's just the whole like just this the CD epidemic that we go back to. Just felt frustrating for sure.
I guess I wanted to. Your suggestion about like Inspired Intellect. So I've never thought about it, but like I guess my question to you with the idea of removing Inspired Intellect and having that choice node, which I think is a good choice node to have for like across the class like defensive balance. The only issue I have, or like concern, especially from like a Blizzard, like if like a Blizzard dev is like watching or something, and they're like, "Oh, I don't like this." Where do you draw the line between like the things that you'd want to have baseline versus like actual choice? Because right, like you can't just be given like 9 defenses, and obviously like the choice node I think does a lot of what you're asking, right? Like if you have to choose Cold Snap and G Invis, like that's great, I love that. But then if you're adding on like an extra defensive, is Mage getting an extra defensive? Like I think that's like causing riots, right?
I can definitely
Yeah.
see the community responding poorly if they don't, think it through right. Because really, it would keep the same number of defensive. It would just give us each spec having the option to get the ones they want, right? But in a general sense, Mage is kind of bloated when it comes to defensives, and I that came up on Max's stream yesterday as well, and it was very much like I think most of us would probably be fine losing a defensive, like especially something.
I would take Alter Time.
I would take
take
Gene
all the
Viz.
time. I love that
Yeah,
I would
spell.
take Gene Viz.
Flat out, I would be fine with losing G Invis. I would
Yeah,
be
me too.
totally fine with losing it and getting our Invis sprint back, because that was something that I loved about early Dragonflight, and G Invis replacing Invis totally killed it, right?
Was the conduit in Shadowlands stronger than the talent? I swear it scaled more than the talent we got. Because I just
I
remember
think
using it
honestly, I don't
on
remember.
The conduit was for sure better, as far as
Yeah.
I remember.
I mean, even so, I played some Warlock yesterday because that's my split alt, and I know 40 has later in here like reactivers, proactive defensives, and I would like press whatever their strongest defensive is, Dark Resolve or whatever, and I would still die because I pressed it a little late, and that's like Mage brain, because Mage defensives, even though they're proactive, are so strong that you can press it late if you're still going to take a large damage event and live. Like G Invis being 60% still is honestly pretty insane. So if there was ever a nerf to it, removing G Invis or just like gutting its damage reduction a little bit to like 30 or less would probably be like the most fair way to go about it. Because again, we don't really have as many passive defensives. But honestly, yeah, we just have a lot of strong, large damage reductions. So I'm not
like
complaining.
Mage as a whole, we have so many defensives. And one of my biggest gripes with the current design is that we have throughput nodes in our class tree. Like even like the little itty bitty guys, 2% haste, 2% crit, but then like shifting power, inspired intellect. I feel like all of our power should come from our spec tree, not the class tree, and the class tree should just be utility. And I think it would be a really good opportunity to kind of spread out our defensives throughout that class tree and make us make those choices. Where we're not choosing damage, we're choosing how to live or how we want to live, or CC or whatever else.
I'm sure a lot of people would be happy if shifting power was only part of one spec instead of all three. I think
Which spec?
most of us, yeah, that's the question: is who gets cursed with it, right? I think
I like that on fire, and that's not because I don't really play fire that much, but just say.
I
fits more with Fire's toolkit, right? It's CDR on top of more CDR, which has kind of been Fire's thing for a couple of expansions. Though I honestly I think it fits Arcane better. I think the timing adjustments that it does between your big and mini has always been super interesting in raids, especially on fights. I've gone back to this a few times over the years, but Dathea was a really interesting one because you did your opener and you could just sit on shifting and do the draw and suck and not even have to worry about ice flows or anything and drop your rune of power after, right? And that was kind of nice. And then shifting after that and still have your CDs up for the platform after. And yeah, so I honestly, people are going to hate me for saying that too, because shifting power, people really hate that it desyncs Arcane from 90-second trinkets, but I think overall it fits the spec a little bit better than it fits on Fire and Frost, at least.
I mean, it's a huge reason for its continued dominance in raid. The ability to do what almost no other burst class can do. Change when your burst timings are with almost no downside. So
I think like especially in keys at least, I really enjoy when I'm playing Arcane and keys when you get to make that choice of like, am I sending my shifting between my big and my mini, or am I sending it after my mini because like I'm not gonna get to send my mini anyway, which is like desync, right? I think that's a really interesting choice. But I will say, like, why do we have to have shifting on a spec, right? Like, what is the actual requirement to have it on be on one spec instead of like we're talking about like just having it for like defenses only? Because the desync between like the arcane cooldowns and like trinkets, or there's just a very interruptive feel of casting it on any of the specs, at least in my opinion. It's just not worth any like that is it's so it always feels bad. I would never want to deal with like having to cast shifting for any purpose of my DPS. Um, Especially because a lot of the times, like I'm sure Billy can attest to this, like you're in a key and you like start casting shifting and they're like, okay, you kick next, and the guy starts casting and it's like, man,
Oh yeah.
like I don't want to kick, like I'm sorry, you know, like no, someone else, please.
I mean,
don't
like,
know.
canceling it just feels like the end of the world. I've liked shifting in keys just for the utility usage because sometimes you can like sneak in like, supernova blast wave shifting and you get them back, you do it again. Same thing with counterspell. I've always liked that part of it, but I've never liked the damage part of it for sure.
Oh, for
I mean,
sure.
it's nice for the AoE stops for sure.
My favorite, honestly, is in PvP when I can kick someone in shifting and then kick them again really quick and really piss them off, right? I think one of the really interesting things, though, is if it only affected... so let's take the hypothetical where it only affects your utility and defensives and doesn't affect your damage spells. You would just skip it, right? Like in raids, you would just never run shifting because you can skip it in the class tree. And if it's only affecting defensives, like, fuck, that's a healer's job, right?
It's probably be something you'd only press out of combat in Mythic Plus too. Like it would never
Yeah.
just be used in just combat drops. You just press it, get all your defenses back.
So yeah,
Or
I don't
if you need to like cover a double kick or something like that, or need
Yeah,
a double
true,
barrier
true.
to live.
I'm not entirely sold on the idea that you would skip it. Like, you would skip it in the sense that, like, the cast time would feel bad and, like, you wouldn't want to cast it. But at the same time, it's like, if you're progging a fight, and there's, like, a part of the fight that's, like, really, like, you're just struggling with for whatever reason, like, especially if you're playing Arcane, getting a double prismatic barrier, like, that is just actually insane, right? Like, you can be immortal, and the trade-off is, like, a 3-second, like, channel, which obviously isn't great. For keys, like, you're fighting like Candle King, you're pushing, and it's like, okay, I'm fine on this set because I have double prismatic. Like, I feel like that has value, especially for a one pointer. It's like interesting to be there, but it definitely wouldn't be I'm just gonna take this baseline. But I can definitely see a world where I'm taking that instead of like diverted energy 1 point, like, or the 3% absorb shield when I shimmer. Like, okay, man, cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think the really interesting thing about that too would be, the dichotomy between like the top end players in cutting bleeding edge content and then everyone else. I think there would be a huge drop off in usage for everyone else just because the moment you take damage out of the equation and you're like, doing a plus 15 or something, nothing super serious, it instantly becomes a lot less valuable to have keys like that where it doesn't actually do any direct damage. And especially on farm, right? You would just never run it on farm.
Well, I saw on Lorgs that they didn't press shifting power and they did the most DPS, so I'm not going to take that.
I do wonder, like, so there's a talent on, I don't know, I think it's Augment. It's like the bottom middle talent that's like, it's one button, you press it, and it's like 1000% CDR for like 3 seconds, and it's like a buff or something like that. The effective outcome is that it's the same as shifting, except it's not a channel. You just press it, and it's just a buff. I do wonder if like that could make shifting be more tolerable in its current design instead. Because definitely a huge part of it, like being annoying, is that it's, oh hey, I'm doing my rotation. I'm like, PFIB pyro, PFIB. I'm gonna sit here and for 3 seconds doing nothing now, just shifting, and it always feels really, really bad. Maybe could mitigate some of that. With that,
I think that would help with Frost concern. With Frost, it's always like if anytime you start channeling this thing in AoE, you're going to overcap Blizzard and Orb CDR any normal amount of targets. So it just gets really annoying. And previously you're gonna end up that introduces like unnecessary complexity rotation, where sometimes you gotta be like, okay, at what target count do I want to actually cancel my shifting power to repress Blizzard or Orb? And it's like, oh, at 8 or 12. And just
Yeah, that's weird. Although I wonder if that'll still be an issue now that Blizzard is such a much more longer cooldown, right?
It hasn't been a thing that I've looked into recently, but it was most recently something in like Dragonflight Season 1.
Frost has always had the weirdest uses. Like, okay, I'm going to enter Icy Veins and then immediately shifting power because, shards or whatever, or just because it needs to go on cooldown. It's never felt right on Frost. Like Fire, I see my combust ticking down. That's cool. Arcane, I know I'm resyncing my cooldowns. I'm going to get that mini burn on time. But with Frost, it's just like trying to cram it in somewhere, and it never makes sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. It is currently necessary for the Cone of Cold combo to really work well because Cone of Cold is 45-second CD, Counter Storm is a 30-second CD. At least before you introduce Frostfire into the mix, the only way to have it consistently where you're like Comet Storm, Cone of Cold, Comet Storm, Comet Storm, Comet Storm, Cone of Cold, Comet Storm, is to have the shifting power in between those. But you know what? This sounds great. Let's put it in Sun Fury's hero tree for Fire and Arcane, and then Frost doesn't have it anymore.
I mean,
That's even your capstone.
Even in the thing you just mentioned, like shifting is still a minute cooldown, but Cone is like 45, so you don't even have it every time for every combo, right? It's not like a cycle.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not doing math right now. Okay. Don't ask me to do math on live.
Okay. But yeah, I don't know. It just definitely feels unsatisfying. I mean, for me, one of the biggest things is always that it's like the on-use desync feels terrible on every single spec. Like you'd think, like, oh, we want an on-use, and it's always like whenever there's a really short cooldown on-use that's good, we equip it, right? Like the staff right now, like everybody hates the staff, but like 2 mage specs love the staff because like, oh, I can have this up every burn. Arcane uses it. Like if Arcane's cooldown were 5 seconds longer, you'd get double the value, and then you still use it now, even though you get 1 of the value, like almost half the value. It's just so insane how much this messes up with like our on use values. It's really frustrating.
But it's not just it's not just the on use value. Like when you're doing like high keys or whatever, you're usually routing around like a 2 minute or a minute 30 or something. There's some kind of like fixed time point in your comp that you're routing your pools around and coordinating with, and then you're trying to resync all the big stuff back up with Bloodlust. And all of the mage specs right now are really in this awkward point where you have to like do like a minor delay or send early so that you have it up for these big pools. For Fire, it doesn't matter because you're always in Combust, and Frost is a little bit more flexible with that. But with Arcane, it can be really clunky to try to align up with these big giga pools.
Yeah, it was
Arcane
a big hinder. Sorry, go ahead.
So Arcane actually has like a decent lineup in keys, but I feel like Frost is a very awkward lineup in keys where it's just not an actual 2 minute, but like you get like 1 a pack and then it's up like halfway through the pack and then you like don't want to send it. And but like Arcane actually has a decent lineup, at least in my opinion, but it depends on the key level, of course. But
and whatever flavor of the month comp it is, like a DK is what, like a minute 30 class right now.
Yeah. Arcane kind of synergizes with that for sure right now.
That's what I was going to reference as well, was back in Dragonflight towards the end of it with AUG Shadow Priest meta, where it was like, if you didn't line up with PI and Breath, you were just not invited, right, into those high keys. And so Arcane was and Frost were struggling a bit more there than Fire, which had a bit more flexibility around CDs, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially because I think that patch we were playing like SKB. If you played Fire and it's just like, okay, I just have damage all the time. Whenever you pop Breath, I'm good. Like, I'm there. I think part of the boon for mages so far, though, in keys has been that, like, oftentimes our meta spec is one that, like Billy was saying, at the highest level of keys especially, you just have a cooldown always, right? Like, you walk into every pack, you know your mage is going to do a minimum amount of damage. Whereas Frost, that's definitely not the case with their minute 50, so it's like, my veins comes up, the pack is 40%, like, do I send here? You don't even have, like, a mini. Like, with Arcane, a lot of times you're like, do I send a mini here? It's like, yeah, I can get off with a mini, Maybe I can even shifting last minute, like, if I need to get my big back for the next pack. You have
just
choices.
Need to bring back Rune of Power, right?
Yes, do it.
But yeah, Frost just does not have anything like that, which makes it really awkward. I don't know what the solution is. I gotta be honest, like, this whole, like, Icy Veins being a real cooldown, but, like, also not, is very awkward for keys. I don't know, maybe it's for later, but yeah.
I would like to see sorry, you
go ahead, Billy. No, you, Billy.
I was just saying, I'd like to see, like, I would love to see Frost. icy veins feel a bit stronger, but like remove shifting power from like, the CDR part of it, because I would like to have a 2-minute trinket, like for example, like the Priory trinket. I wish it synced up, or there's probably other trinkets I could do the example of, but I really
Like
wish
one
that
next year.
yeah, they exactly like I forget what it's called, like
Is that the Forge?
the one that like
Yeah.
hurts yourself, right? Like
Forge
I
Weaver,
was
yeah.
using it in keys on PTR, and it was just like sometimes I was just sending it like out of cooldowns, and I was just like, this just feels so like unnatural to me.
I would love to see Frost become that minute spec and then compress IV down to like 15, 20 seconds, like kind of tighten in the damage, but like hit it on like a fixed minute. Because right now all our specs are kind of like drifting together, where we all kind of have the same damage pattern, except for fire, which we'll get into that later. But I would love to see like some differentiating between the pacing of our cooldowns, so that, you know, Frost has the minute, Arcane covers the minute 30, and then please make fire a 2-minute spec again.
And then
So we
give,
have
give Frost a 3-minute ice elemental and your Destro Warlock with some shred cleave. Toss that in there.
I like the
You
idea
can
of
even
like
make it stun.
I like the idea of like making it like the 1 minute but like more consistent. I think they did that with actually Final Fantasy, the other Frost spec in the game with DK. Like their breath was like this 2-minute, 50-second cooldown, like 50-second duration, and like everybody hated it, and it's like really frustrating to get off in like real applications, especially like in keys. And now it's like a much shorter cooldown, much shorter duration. They can extend it a little bit, but it's like not an insane amount. But it just makes it like more real practice applicable. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
See,
I'm
someone in
pro that.
sorry,
I
go ahead.
I would still want like Water Elemental to have a freeze cooldown that's like equal, so that you can get like 2 uses out of it in an Icy Veins, because I think Water Elemental is like an underrated but satisfying thing to use when you're actually in Icy Veins. Not that freezes have really been on the front of many people's minds recently. A lot of times people will come to the Major Square and say, "What's freeze?" And then I have to explain to them that they summon a Water Elemental, and that Water Elemental has abilities. But
It's funny because the water elemental was the most iconic part of Frost for a lot of years, right? From like TBC on. Someone in chat actually brought up an idea I've seen come up a lot, which is making shifting power a choice node. I think we would all be in favor of that, right? You can take it when you actually need that flexibility, and you know, maybe time anomaly is the other choice, and or Rune of Power is what was recommended. Although I think Rune of Power would be a little bit stronger than shifting power, relatively. Another issue too, and something we had in the doc, was about melee mage, and shifting power is a good segue into that, I think. What do you guys think is like the major hang up that Blizzard has with kind of forcing all of the mage specs to be played in very close range, right? Like you can't really play a ranged mage in the current state of the game, at least not, you know, for 100% of your rotation, right? At least 10 to 15% of your spells tend to be spells that you either have to cast in melee or you want to, right? There's some kind of incentive.
I mean,
So I think
go ahead.
I think part of it, like the utility aspect, makes sense. Like we're a very mobile class. We have Blink, we have Shimmer, we have Ice Flows. Like we can get in and out quick. So needing to come in Dragon's Breath or Blast Wave or anything like that, that makes sense. I think a lot of the damage aspect is unintentional, like with the Phoenix Flames bug or you know, Orb Travel. Who at Blizzard was thinking, man, what if they stand at 40 yards and double barrage? Like I don't think that was a design goal. And that actually, that's another topic we have on there, where some of our spells being calculated on hit, some of them being calculated on cast, and like the parity doesn't exist across all of our spells. So you default to playing in melee because it just works.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was gonna mention. Like the fact that our damage is uniquely amongst like most classes in the game. I think like very rarely some other classes will have something, but the majority, like all of Frost spells, I think, right? And like Phoenix Flame, our hot streaks for fire, Arcane, like with the travel time of Orb, which granted they fixed this patch. Yeah, Cone of Cold, like a lot of our stuff is just you're really incentivized to be in melee for the purposes of like your procs and just the calculation, which is a really frustrating mechanic because Blizzard never paid attention to this when designing bosses. Because why would you, right? Like, why would you tailor to one? So like, I remember day one PTR Volcaros, the forums were just mages crying. Like, please, this boss feels terrible. My spells just don't work. Please, like, you gotta change something. This happened on Radiance of Ashara back in Eternal Palace, I believe, as well. I think they did something to it back then, but they never touched Volcaros. And these specs always feel terrible on this fight, and it's always picking the spec that just feels the least bad. And I just don't understand the hang-up. Why do our spells need to be calculated on landing? Like, is it really that problematic for our spells to give us like heating up and hot streak when we cast them? Like, we have that actually with Flame Strike, right? Where like Flame Strike's hot streak is not technically inherent on whether the spell crits or not, but it's like a % chance to grant it based on your crit. It's like a weird thing they have in the back end for like Flame Strike. Why does that not exist for like Phoenix Flame? Phoenix Flame is a guaranteed crit, right? We had that talent at the top that like you're never gonna ever drop. You know, that's like such an easy fix. I think that goes like a massive way. Arcane, they already did the orb travel time thing. Frost, you know, their orbs. I don't know. It's very frustrating because most other classes don't have something like this they have to deal with.
Absolutely.
Frost actually gets massively punished in keys too. And sometimes there'll be a strategy you got to stand like 40 yards away or something where you guys stand like some weird snap spot. And like if you're Frost and you press orb, it's probably gonna not be in the ideal spot. So like, or you gotta like alter jump down conical alter. It's just like it's just awkwardness for Frost. Like it's probably like that in, like Halls and Fusion last expansion or like Braconite. Like I've seen this so much, but like Fire and Arcane usually get it better. But like I think Frost is super punished by this. I wish they would have like a PvP orb would just be so nice.
I would say
It's
Arcane.
a similar problem melee because with Frozen Orb, you can't be too far away to misposition it. But if you're in melee with all the whole, you can't be this far away or the mobs will start jumping to range. So everyone wants to group in melee, and then your Frozen Orb has the minimum distance it has to travel, and it just goes like through the mobs, and so it's hitting them for like the first 4 seconds, and then it's gone. So I mean, it's just a Frozen Orb problem.
But I mean, Frost in itself is the worst offender for this because so much of it is like, well, if I cast it at this distance with this haste, it's going to hit the Winter's Chill first. But if I queue this spell in, well, now that's going to eat it first because the travel time is different for some unknown reason. So, like Fire, you definitely notice it because of the Phoenix Flame bug and how awful that feels relative to like pressing IB. But Frost, the entire kit is just fighting itself.
It's all Winter's Chill, right? If you make everything function with Fingers of Frost, it works perfectly fine because the issues are just right. I mean, you said it, the landing with Winter's Chill, but Winter's Chill, wasn't made to like solve like precast or anything. It was made for passive effects, for AoE shattering and stuff. So then you put everything back on Fingers of Frost like it kind of was before Winter's Chill, and that's a relatively smooth transition for like your single target rotation. But then you need to solve like the AoE problem, which honestly probably isn't too hard if you just make it where consuming Winter's Chill allows you, like gives you buff that shatters the next X amount of passive ticks of something, Icicles, Frostfire Infusion, Blizzard, or something like that. But either way, you're gonna end up in like a worse case of you're not able to shatter as many passive effects. And I'm going off on a tangent here, but that also kind of solves the Frostbolt problem of that cropping up because most of the time when it comes up, it's because your Winter's Chill is just up for longer, and then it shatters way more of your passive effects, like Frostfire with its Frostfire Dot, and then the Frostfire Infusion. That's like the main reason that came about, and for Splinters, right? And the same issue happened in Dragonflight when Icicles were too strong. So, yeah, it's not time for Frost yet.
No, but I think we can. Honestly, I think we've saturated the class section a little bit here. Let's talk about Frost. So, we've talked a little bit about the problem of when damage is calculated, which is definitely something that affects all 3 specs in an annoying way, probably Arcane the least at this point, a lot because its dependence is on orb now instead of explosion. And but anyways, so our first topic here, and I think it's a big one for a lot of the community here, is Frozen Orb lacking a targeting option. Cold Front in the Spellslinger tier is also another issue. I know there's some bugs there that have come up as well with if you fire off if you stack up your Cold Front and you get the set proc at the same time, and you fire off one Frostbolt, you only get one proc, right? Instead of two like you should, I think is what I was reading the other day from Cooney and you.
It's when there's two frozen orbs that you send out at the same time. The when frozen orb hits an enemy for the first time, it gives you Fingers Frost, and so when you have two in the air at the same time before one is hit an enemy, it won't you'll lose a Fingers Frost in that occasion.
Okay.
Which isn't too crazy, but
No, that's way less.
Amounting to any actual damage lost. Was that like 0.3 or something?
Yeah, it's relatively minor. I mean, there's still probably something janky about Spellslinger. Just we haven't found out what it is, because it's definitely, it doesn't usually look as strong in game as it is in Sims, but there's nothing that, you can compare logs and everything to that we found that like directly points to something saying this is what's misbehaving. So, maybe this year. Who knows? We'll see. I mean, I think the whole orb positioning thing is a little 2022. In the current day and age, we got Ravager, we got Entropic Rift. We're really looking for follow the target, especially when you have Frozen Orb, which lasts longer than Entropic Rift at least. And I don't know how long Ravager lasts, but I have to assume it's probably less than 12 seconds. And we send it out at sometimes like every 4 seconds, and it loses so much value because of how it functions that it's kind of ridiculous compared to these lesser effects that have better quality of life. So silly.
I mean, it's just extremely punishing Mythic Plus specifically. And you're like an average pug tank. You gotta like always predict their movement. That's like one of the things of Frost Mage and Keys is like looking at how your tank moves, and it's just punishing if they just you never can predict everything. So it's always my least favorite thing.
What do you guys think would be the best solution here? Do you think it would be better just to be able to flatly target where your orb goes and have it stick in that targeting reticule? One of the other ideas I've heard for this is have it be like a sticky bomb, right? Where the first mob it hits, it essentially staples onto that mob, and that mob carries the frozen orb wherever it goes, which I personally think that would be really cool looking, especially for the frozen orb animation in particular.
I don't know about
That's kind of like the thing
bomb.
Sorry, go.
Living bomb, but frozen orb. Go ahead, Billy.
I was saying, it's kind of like the Shadow Priest thing, or the Shadow Priest, the Void Eater thing, right? Where
Entropic Rift.
Entropic Rift, like it just sticks to a target. It would just be so much nicer. Like I think I think almost any fix would be better than what we have now. But like the PvP orb would be nice, the one you could place anywhere, or even just like the Entropic Rift. It would just make it Frost so much more realistic in Keys.
I think this is also like you can't do a position solve without also like reducing its duration. We've definitely reached the point where it's just up for probably too long. 12 seconds is a really long time for something that moves, or even for something that doesn't move, with how many that you send out. And in the past, it's been more impactful because you have like freezing winds where it would give you like extra Fingers of Frost ticks. I mean, it still does give you extra Fingers of Frost ticks, but we're not really like that in drought of Fingers of Frost ticks, so it's fine if it you massively amp its damage and you shift it down to like a 4 or 5 second duration instead. So yeah, I would be pro that. But I mean, you calling it like down on the target and just sticks there, follows him like Entropic Rift does, I think that's kind of the best solution with the current design.
Yeah, I think sticking to a target like by moving or something like that, that's definitely nice. I was gonna say I don't know about it following the first target it hits. That sounds like a nightmare, I'm not gonna lie. Like you just throw it, some random ad walks by, definitely would want it to be like on the target. But I mean like the PvP version, or like something like the old Frost Bomb, right, where you like attach it to the target. Reducing the duration. Like if you play MoP, funnily enough, like this, I've been playing MoP, and a lot of the times I'm playing, I'm like, wow, I wish I had this on retail. And like in MoP, your frozen orb is insane damage, but it doesn't last like that long. That would be like nice, right? Like it's exactly what Manather is saying, condensing the damage down, make it shorter duration, but like way more impactful. That's pretty cool. Following a target like Entropic Rift would also be nice. Maybe it can follow like a Winter's Chill if they keep that on. There's like a lot of things. They have a lot of options. It's just they've just left it.
I feel like almost anything would be better than what we have now.
True. And I want to say, this whole part of this conversation is pointless, because if you look at Chochi's rank 1 logs, okay, he's got 100% hit rate on his frozen orb in raid. So I think it's a skill issue.
Have any of y'all played Shaman recently with the totemic recall or something where they can replace their totem? That would be sick for like Blizzard and Forb to just be like they drop an arcane rune and that magnetizes all your orbs and blizzards over there or something. That would be cool to me. That would bring like a lot of skill expression opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I think the concern there is Frost kind of is in a bit of a button bloat state, especially in AoE. I think it's got a good, set of AoE abilities, but once you start throwing freezes in there, you have Comet Storm, kind of cold, all your main abilities, you very quickly get to a point where, someone that's new to the spec or even someone that's like been kind of keeping up with it minorly over the years is just going to be a little bit overwhelmed trying to get back into it. You compare that to like Arcane, right? You need blast, barrage, missiles, and orb, and that's it. So I mean, it caters to different populace, but I think adding more buttons in there is always going to be challenging. But yeah, positional direction is kind of cool. And then the other issue is right now you can have multiple blizzards. And one of the things I disliked the most about 11.1 was they made it so that you could naturally have multiple blizzards by Blizzard's CD being shorter than its duration. And most of the time that's not the case, so you can only get multiple blizzards when you're shifting power. And I think, limiting us to one blizzard and just tuning accordingly is also fine. And then having that be, you could even say blizzard lasts like 20 seconds and it has no CD and recasting it only repositions it. And that might be good. But depending on how that change is communicated, that could be issues just because of how Frost has been in the past. One of the most recent examples of this is when we went to Dragonflight and Flurry was castable without Brain Freeze. Even now, I saw something in the Discord earlier today where someone was like, do we cast Flurry without Brain Freeze? And it's like, because they kept the same iteration, it just doesn't make sense to people who are used to passive iterations because it's not clear enough. But
it's an interesting point. I definitely I've heard this a few times now, and I'm curious what you think, especially Manather and Azuna here. Do you think Frost is bloated with buttons? So when we look at Arcane, you've got 5 core buttons, right? Fire, pretty much the exact same. And then Frost, you go down through the class tree and like the things that you actually need to get and what's available to get, you can get like 8 rotational buttons, right? And it's kind of like playing a piano at a certain point. And I think late Dragonflight kind of actually felt a little bit like that because you were running all of those active talents as opposed to just 1 or 2 of them, right?
I feel like Frost has just so many different freezes. I feel like they should somehow make just like one freeze button. I don't know, like maybe just your Frost Nova just turns into Ice Nova baseline or something, and you don't really have like an Elemental Nova because like there's just so many different freezes you got going on. Plus like the base rotation buttons just seem so much.
I mean, I agree about the freezes thing. Having Frost Nova, be kind of sucked into Ice Nova, so Ice Nova has like 2 charges would be nice because you just don't really want to use Frost Nova except for CC. But Ice Nova you really like using for damage reasons. Right now, Frost Nova is a utility button. Really, it's nice because it actually has the long freeze duration, and Ice Nova is only 1.5 seconds. I like all the buttons Frost currently has. I do think like it makes more sense if we were to not take some of them in single target, like taking Comet Storm in single target, and then you also take Ray of Frost in single target, and you're like, okay, well, that's a little unfortunate. And the AoE gets a little bit more convoluted with the freezes, so condensing that a little bit. But I think I'm happy with that because Frost really is a combo spec, and you need abilities to make combos, and you need those to be fluid. And I think it does that part well. Where Frost is failing right now is one and a little bit of like its functionality, I would say. So you have like this overbloat of CDR on Frozen Orb, which was solved a little bit going into next year, but still like with Coldest Snap, that Resetting Orb, when you already have Blizzard Resetting Orb and you already have Spellfrost Teachings Resetting Orb, that's too much. There's a lot of CDR going on for Frost for all its variety of abilities that doesn't really need to be there. But yeah, so I think it just would make sense for us to like them to look at maybe making it so that there's an alternative to Comet Storm and single target that you don't need to press it.
Curious what you... Oh, go ahead, D-John.
I was going to say, how would you feel about Ray and Comet Storm being on a choice node with each other? And then you obviously have to like mess with Frostfire and make it trigger off Ray of Frost or whatever. But would that be an option? So it's always like you need to pick one or the other?
I mean, I think it's tough to get into the single target versus AoE choice. That's always like kind of historically gone down poorly when both are necessary in their respective places. So that's where you want to get away from that. But Comet Storm kind of being like solidified in the cleave area with you take like passives to get past it that isn't deep shatter. And then, Ray Frost being like potentially where it was in Dragonflight, where it's like, okay, if you want to take this in Mythic Plus, you kind of can if you want a little bit more single target. But realistically, it's not like kind of the expected or base thing that we would want you to take in Mythic Plus. I think that works out well. If we were going to do a choice node of anything with like Storm, it would probably be Orb. I think that would be hard to do without like a more complete rework, but they are functionally, they serve the same purpose, especially with Frostfire right now, where you have consistent CDR for both of them, and they're both AoE abilities kind of that you want to cast in single target. So
yeah, I almost feel like they're going in the direction of having Orb be more of a resource tool, right? It's up for a while, it's generating Fingers of Frost. I almost think that they are kind of moving towards Orb being more like Arcane Orb rather than like Comet Storm, where it's more damage focused. It'll be interesting if that's true and if that actually plays out to any degree. But I fully agree. Comet Storm and Orb are essentially the same spell, right? The short, mid-range cooldown, short burst of damage. That, like, how much more differentiated can you get, right?
I mean, of the two, Comet Storm is definitely the better spell. It fits a lot better into Frost like base rotation, right? You have for Frostfire right now, Comet Storm and Ice Nova is just a great thing to do, or you'll just in general for Frostbolt, Flurry, Comet Storm, and that just fits a lot better, more fluidly into what your real rotation is versus Frozen Orb is just fire and forget right now. It's a maintenance mode spell, and I tend to find that it's just not satisfying. I mean, I know in MoP it is just insane, right? It does a bunch of damage. It's a true 1 minute CD. It feels good there, but in retail it's just it's up, press it, and then you probably can't even see it. Like most of the time, I can't even see it unless all the mobs are dead or it's 30 yards away from the mobs. So it's just not great. But
I will say, I think the idea of like making them a choice node like Orb and Comet Storm is a very organic way or like natural idea based off of our hero talents, right? Like even right now, Frostfire doesn't cast Orb, and Spellslinger doesn't cast Comet Storm, and the other one is the identity of the hero tree. So I feel like that is actually a very like intuitive or like natural design for them to go for. I will push back on one thing. I am an Orb enjoyer. While Orb has like a lot of issues, I do like the idea of like when I'm playing a boss and I have like 4 orbs out and I'm getting Fingers of Frost procs, especially with like Spellslinger. I do like the idea of like, oh, I'm just getting Ice Lance. That feels nice to me. I enjoy that, and like seeing the orbs in front of me, it's like dopamine, right? Especially like in the past iteration where you get the resets and you had that weak core that's like meowing in your ear every time you get a reset.
Yes.
Oh, like that shit felt good, like yeah.
The season 1 Gamba Frost build was the most fun I've had on Frost since like Burning Crusade. Like mine was just a ding, so it was like pulling the slot machine every pull, just ding 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 ding. I got like one pull on Kai Vezzer or something where I just had permanent orbs. It was so beautiful. But I'm mainly like a fire or some arcane player, which very few buttons. Fire, they're very fast buttons, but there's very few of them. And it comes down to like the decision of which one you're going to press. So when I swap to Frost, I do kind of enjoy the piano aspect of it, like having all these like different options to press and trying to decide which one is the correct option. And I do enjoy that. But like Azuna was saying, the freezes, if everything functioned the same way Pet Freeze worked, Frost would be goated. Like if I had an OG CD like ranged freeze on demand, I would love it.
Yeah, I think one of the things I really like about Comet Storm in particular over Orb, when we talk about that discussion there, to disagree a bit with Forgy here, I do love Orb. I love it when you have the Spell Slinger and you've got 4 orbs lined up in front of you. That shit's great. But I really like that Comet Storm actually feels like a Shatter combo, right? It feels like it's leveraging the basics of the spec that you learn when you are leveling it up, right? It's like the stuff that's bread and butter there. And Orb, just to Manather's point, right? It's just kind of too long for for that to feel like a shatter. But it does look really cool when you have a bunch of them. So let's touch on something else here. So I definitely want to talk about mastery and the Frostfire problem, because I think this is going to come up a couple of times in the next tier, especially as people think about gearing around Frost and Arcane for Mana Forge. Because right now Arcane is very leaning into mastery a lot more than it used to after the redesigns. And I think Frost, you've got one spell tree that is very mastery friendly, and then you've got one that is doesn't really want it at all, right? And I think that's going to be a bit of a headache to navigate, because I think Frostfire might end up being the more useful tree of the two in Mana Forge. What do you think about that, Degen?
I think anytime mastery is getting pushed out of your stat budget is bad design. Anytime you start seeing verse climbing up, it's a sign that something is inherently wrong with your spec. Like historical example, Windwalker, for the longest time, they just stacked verse to the moon. I geared an entire tune just doing PvP to push keys with. And anytime like we're straying away from like haste always feels good. Haste affects your gameplay. Mastery should always be a relevant stat, because it's like mastery is your, I don't know what we call it, your class design almost. So anytime that's getting pushed out, it's bad. I will say that I haven't felt like multi-specking this entire expansion has been difficult. The stat budgets on a lot of our raid items are pretty broad. Like you go in and you're getting a little bit of everything, and so many of your slots are locked in hard that all I've really been doing is swapping jewelry. I'll get a different neck, or I'll craft a different neck, and that feels fine to me. I never really think too heavily about stats, but from a design standpoint, the mastery getting pushed down, especially for only one hero spec, is really bad design.
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things that come up for me with Frost in particular, and Arcane really, I think Fire doesn't have this problem as much. I think Fire's mastery is generally kind of beloved part of the spec. I think Frost and Arcane's mastery is kind of boring, right? They're essentially just percentage damage. I almost feel like Frost mastery should really lean more, if it's going to be percentage damage, it should really be shatter damage, right? Rather than icicles.
I mean, the issue with that historically has just been, well, when it existed in Wrath, as that, you just didn't have enough shatters. Nowadays we do, but what we don't have is the consistent AoE shatters. Whereas Chill, helps with that, and Roots kind of help with that, but they're not consistent, right? They're brief periods where you have that. Like as Frostfire, when you do the Cold combo and you're like, okay, let me just flurry ice lance to get excess fire and excess frost into all this Winter's Chill. And you just get degeneracy because you don't have as consistent access to that. One thing that we could look at, right, is that Cold being melee is a bit of a problem. It having so many resets bloats the AoE rotation. You kind of toss down to Ice Nova, where you have range Winter's Chill application now on a shorter cooldown, where you can like Comet Storm Ice Nova reliably without knowing if the mobs are freezable. That also, if you lean into that mastery, gives you like this mini burn phase essentially in AoE every 25 seconds, where you're like, okay, now's the time to send all my AoE damage into the shatter, and that synergizes a bit with the mastery. One thing I did want to mention was, I looked at the patch notes from, I don't know, was it last week or something? And in Frost DK, they had something where it said like Razor Burn or something is added to the mastery, and I'm like, ridiculous. Because even just adding Meteor or Frostfire Infusion to Frost Mastery would solve this problem entirely. And when they did at the start of the PTR cycle, just flat buff Mastery scaling by 40%. That made it much better for Spellslinger, but they said we're going to keep monitoring this if the issue persists. The issue always has been with Frostfire and the effects that aren't on it killing it. So I just thought it was silly to see Frosty K get something added to their mastery when that's all Frostfire needs.
I don't know how much it affects Frost itself, but on the Fire side, when you're playing the Frostfire tree, a lot of people discount how much like haste and mastery you're getting from those passive effects. Like Sun Fury ends up playing, 50, 60% haste if it can. But Frostfire is pretty happy down at that 35, 38% because it's getting that passive bump up. So really it's playing a fairly equal amount, but on paper, it looks a lot lower.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't really like that on Frostfire. I mean, it was done in a way to like make the specs more equalized, right? It was originally like 1%. They buffed it to 2% because the Frostfire specs were underperforming, and it just feels like in general, like right now in retail, we just have such an overload of stats all the time, and it makes things challenging or even just like not fun. But
I mean, it's hard because like that exact thing about like the overload of stats. I agree with that. Now that we're in like patch 4, you're like loading in, and it's like, oh, we're like 60% haste walking around in Dornegal. But the nice part is patch 1, you're not at 5% haste anymore, right? Like that. I remember like every expansion you'd go in from like, oh, we have like 7 corruption items. I'm like expedient fire mage or expedient warlock or something, and then I level up 2 times, and now I'm at like nothing. And it always felt bad, and that was like an age-old problem that faced every new expansion. But now that doesn't feel as bad because you're just pretty well statted, patch 1. I don't know what the solution is. My like tinfoil was that all these like funny items they've been adding, like Cersei's and like the belt and stuff, that could have been a great way to take away stats and give us other benefits. Because obviously if you lose a ring slot, it's like, okay, minus 10,000 stats or something. But then people complain like, oh, my ring doesn't have stats. It has like this boring proc that I don't want. I do sympathize with them. It's like it's stuck between a hard rock and a hard place, right? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to move us on to a different topic. Was I had put in here about we talked a little bit about defensives earlier, and one thing that I think is currently missing really is like more a reason for each of the spec barriers. Something that I liked the idea of quite a lot in Shadowlands and never really had the it was never really good to take was like glacial insulation, where that's where when your frost barrier was up, it gives you like 200% increased armor. I'd be doing like Sludge Fist, and you're hearing, oh, we need the boomies in the soak because they have more armor, so they can live it, and you don't want like your priests in it or whatever. And it's like you just got slammed by physical damage in Castlanathria, I guess. So I just wanted some armor, but that just feels like a better passive when you look at Prismatic Barrier compared to like, oh, melee attackers get slowed by 50% for 1 second. And you're like, what is that? Frost also has its like 4% bigger barrier, and that's pretty strong. It's not nothing. And then Mop definitely brings up a lot of things to talk about, and one of those is when I was looking at Cold Snap and Mop that no one takes because on the the talent node with Cauterize and G-Invis. But it also gives you 30% max HP when you use it. It's like a mini health stone, and I think that would help Frost higher than average death rate currently, right? It's to use its spec defensive, you need 2 different presses, and a lot of times people are doing that reactively instead of proactive, like they probably should be, just because of how mage defensives work. So it being like a little mini healthstone, like it has been, would save those people from dying. But does mage really need more defensives? I don't know.
Personally, I really liked what Legion did with barriers, where Fire Mage got physical DR, Arcane got magic DR, Frost got a bigger barrier, and it was like 20% back then bigger, I think, if I remember right. And it was a little bit more measured against the DR, right? But it was cool that like each barrier had some sufficiently, something comparable, right? As it stands today, it's really just Prismatic Barriers better than the other two very flatly, right? The Frost defensive parity is definitely a problem, and you see that in death statistics almost every tier as well, right? Like it's definitely not it's not like some imaginary thing. Like Frost Mage is definitely the least defensive spec, especially if damage is surprising you. Caught tends to be a lot better. If damage is planned, Prismatic Barrier tends to be a lot better. And Frost just doesn't have anything that's really better other than you can double immune, which is useful, one encounter in expansion, right?
And I hate to say, like, especially when you take Ice Cold, Hypothermia just should not work. But, it's sticking around is just old. You don't need that, and it limits Cold Snap's usage a bit. I do think that, a bit of the higher death rate is because Frost tends to be kind of the larger sample size, more casual player spec most tiers. This tier that wasn't really true, especially from the beginning to the middle. It was definitely a lot of the casual players were flocking to Fire, and so if you actually looked at the death statistics, then Fire was actually really low. So it's a bit of the general Mage populace bringing it down, but Frost was still down there too. So,
but those death statistics, they hold true up into a pretty high percentile. Like eventually, you get the rank 1 players and they know how to not die. But even up into like the 80, 90 percentile, you still see Frost dying a lot more than you do a Fire or an Arcane Mage. And going back to just like the base barrier difference, the difference between, Porom pressing mass barrier as an Arcane Mage and me doing it as a Fire Mage is insane. Because all your teammates are getting that, 25% DR? Like in a key, that's absolutely wild.
On Kaiveza, I mean, it was literally night and day playing Arcane and another spec early into Prague before they started nerfing it. It was like, it went from, I just press barrier when I'm getting whatever the dash was on you, to, holy shit, I'm pressing ice block if I'm playing another spec, which you did not want to do. So
there's actually a boss in Mythic Plus last expansion, Tulsar, where like you would play Fire the whole key and then like swap Arcane just for last boss, just because it the group DR was just you lived one like entire mechanic. Like as your teammates need to press a single button. Right? Yeah, it was super OP for that. Like mages would just do that just for that.
I was gonna
good for you.
So I was gonna. This is kind of like. It begs the question: do people actually like barrier? Like I'm not a fan of any of the barriers. I feel like. I don't like the I have to press a global cooldown every 20 seconds to like maintain a level of defensiveness, like a baseline level of defensiveness relative to like other specs. When like these other specs just have like off global cooldown fade like 10% DR, like
I'm gonna regen auto proc
and
shit like that,
right? AMS off global cooldown once again. Short. Like why does Mage have to have an on global cooldown mid defensive other than Arcane? It almost feels like it shouldn't be that like Arcane needs to be nerfed and like the other ones need to be buffed. I would rather just trade the barrier for something else.
This is a good point for you too, because this is like something I've rallied on a few times before. Is mages have the lowest HP in the game. We're tied with priest for lowest base stamina as a class, and priests get fortitude baseline. So if you have a priest in the group, you're on par with them on HP, and if you don't, you're lower than them. And really, that barrier is there to make up that difference. And honestly, I would rather be a warlock and just have 15% more stamina and, not have to worry about hitting a defensive every 20 seconds, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, like, I for what it's worth, I do think Boomkin, at least it was like a couple of batches ago, also had really low HP, but they had like bear form and stuff. I think one thing that has crept up over the years that I think has kind of like fallen by the wayside in people's thoughts was every time they did that change where it was like we're gonna buff everything's HP, we're gonna buff player health and buff the damage done or something of the bosses. I forgot what it was, but like those changes, where they're like making healers better. Every time that happened, it made every class that had a baseline level of like leech or shielding passively gain a lot more value, because now we're facing a lot less rod damage. We're facing a lot more raw damage compared to like a one-shot. Which, some people might hear that and be like, oh, but in keys, like, you get one-shot. And I think that's just like keys. But when you look at raid, right? Like, you remember back in the day, it's like, okay, this boss is going to one-shot you every like 20 seconds. And then you go into raid now and it's like, okay, well, you have Rashok. You have, some of these end bosses that are just like rotting you over time. They're just like taking damage a lot more often. And then it's just like, oh, Warlock has Soul Leech constantly going. And Warlock is supposed to be like notoriously like kind of squishy against Leech. Shadow Priest has like 2 or 3 sources of like self-healing. Most classes have like DR in their talent class tree, right? Like the Druid has the Hardened Fur or whatever it is. And Mage has nothing. And it's just like, oh, you have 6 defenses. Well, that's great. But like, if I'm getting ticked every 2 seconds like on Kajin, what am I gonna do? Like invis a tick? Like, sick, man. Thanks. It feels bad, and I think the fact that I have to press barrier every 20 seconds, sometimes have to manage it to try and get more of these feels bad presses, I don't know. I just don't want barrier. Like I want something else instead. You know, especially with how many other defenses we have.
I have a macro in my Hellstone that just screams at my healers. The healers, I'm rotting out. What can we do? And if I press that, I'm not pressing another button.
Yeah, my best defensive is me opening Discord and going, "Please heal me, one heal."
Something I thought was
Yeah.
a cool alternative in MOP was there's like a talent or a choice node where you get a temporal shield. I thought that's like kind of a cool defensive in MOP to use.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be like a replacement for Ice Barrier.
I think Alter like fits in that thing right now.
Yeah.
But I would also be open to like the shields being in some sort of way passive, and then you just have mass barrier as like an active shield button that's really meant for like big events for your group and everything. I think that would feel good, and it also there's a way to do that where Mage, while not being squishier, it's it's towards rot damage, less towards burst damage, because right now Mage is just honestly far too excellent at dealing with any type of burst damage events because they have so many defensives that can deal with them. And so shifting our barriers towards more of a rot damage focus would help us from our major weakness there, and kind of nerf us in the other way.
I mean, there's actually, funnily enough, MOP again. There's a talent that I'm looking at right now. Protect you from fiery energy, absorbing X damage from each attack against you. Like, they could easily add something like, oh, X% of your elemental damage done gives you a shield, or you take X amount of reduced damage from every hit, or something like that. Just something passive to combine with the rest. Because right now, you're just fully proactive defensive. You go look at any M+ fights, like, oh, well, my druid can do a personal here, and we're going to do a mass barrier here, and then they all make a plan, and then you go to the mage, and it's like, figure it out, man, I don't know. It's just, yeah.
I really enjoy the defensive aspect of Mage. That's one of the things that's kept me on this class for, God knows how long. And I enjoy Barrier on Prog. I enjoy, learning when I should press it, what I need to live, and kind of like mapping out my defensives. What I hate is doing that for the rest of farm. Like if I don't press this barrier, I'm dead.
Would it be better if it was just off the global cooldown? I feel like that would solve a lot of our complaints, right?
Yeah.
I think that would be bad for a certain level of player, right? It works for once you get above an area, but like especially once you go lower, you already have people like trouble getting people to press alter time. Alter time's not as useful, I guess, in the proactive sense as barrier, because barrier has the 60-second and it's just a flat absorb. So, it's easy to get used to that. But I think asking people to like maybe press an off GC button every 20-25 seconds for the defensives, just for that barrier is like a bit too much in terms of.
You'd also just macro it into shit, right? You wouldn't think about it anymore if it was 20 seconds off GCD.
At that point, it might as well be passive.
Yeah.
So why do people not complain about that with like Fade though? Like nobody ever complains about like Fade being off. Like Fade is actually a 50% uptime, 10% DR. You could macro it into everything, but it's just a nice strong button. Like for me personally, like obviously I know your concern was for like the lower end play. I would take a nerf on every single one of our defensive to make them off GCD. Cut mirror image in half duration, make it off GCD. Like this is the thing. Like I hate how every mage spec feels like there are moments where I really, really want to cast my DPS buttons right now. Not just like cooldowns. I'm talking like in terms of like these cycles that feel satisfying to do. And then it's like, oh, okay, cast barrier, cast mirror image, cast something else. And it's like, I need to layer 3 on global defensives to live this mechanic. When it's like, okay, I wish I could just press a bark skin, or I wish I could. That's like the biggest thing going from mage to every alt. Defensives just feel simpler, off global cooldown, basic, like, here, survival of the fittest, Yeah.
We often get shit about having so many defensives, but there's not a lot of attention played to the fact that if we don't play them correctly, we die, and if and they're all for the most part on the global cooldown. Like you have alter and ice cold to cover those burst windows, and then everything else costs you. You know what I mean? Bring it back to Frost a little bit as well. We put in the doc about hypothermia, and it's like, why does hypothermia still exist in PvE? I understand why it exists in PvP, right? To prevent people from caging up in the most disastrous of scenarios, or to, as a hard counter against warrior and priest, right? but like hypothermia doesn't. I don't think about hypothermia in PvE at all. Like there's never a situation where I'm like, I need to use ice cold twice in under 30 seconds. And if there is, like, who cares, right? Is it really like you're spending your defensive power to have that, and it's just not there as frost?
So somebody just posted in the chat asking about how much damage we're actually losing pressing these defensives. And this is actually an experiment I played out with Hopeful for SKB Fire not too long ago, and then we repeated it for Unleashed. So worst case scenario, you need to press a barrier in every single combustion, 25-second cooldown. You're losing about 12% damage right off the rip. So giving up 1 GCD in combustion on a 25-second cooldown is about a 10 to 12% damage loss. Arcane is a little bit less. I want to say it sits around 7 and 8% for losing a GCD in Surge. Frost, I have no idea. I'm sorry. But there is an opportunity cost at play.
For sure.
But
using it off cooldown is 6% of your cast, right? Like,
yeah.
That's an insane proposition.
I've never felt this tax really in raid. Like there's been a few fights like, Kaiveza, where you really have to commit to the defensive play. Where I feel it more, and I'm sure Forky and Azuna, who have really pushed those higher keys, when you get into those live or die keys, where if you do not press this barrier, you are getting one shot. There is no if, and, or but around it. Especially when you're playing these CDR driven specs, where you need your combust back up for this next pack, or whatever. That's where I feel like the defensive gameplay really gets punishing.
Especially like when you weave it in with like stops, right? Like you go into a key, you're facing a strong pack, and it's like, okay, Mage triple stop. Okay, Supernova, Barrier, Mass Volley, Blast Wave. I have to pop something else now. And it's like, well, my cooldown is gone, man. Like, let me breathe, please. It's just so frustrating. Like, that everything is on global, he's just facing this issue. I don't know, yeah. It's just, yeah.
Can I side note this into the stops change they made? Because they keep saying like, "Oh, we're so happy with it," but you need more stops. You need more stops than you needed before because it doesn't stop the cast. You have to chain them, so you literally need more coordination and more stops than you did before they did it. It should just go on CD when you stop it for like 30 seconds, and then you don't need 7 stops every pack. So, sorry.
Yeah. To be fair,
I don't think anyone likes that change.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to be fair, from their perspective, it is definitely a thing of like the idea of the recasting means that the stop has less value, which means for medium to low keys, people will just not stop them. And I think that's what they're targeting. They're not targeting the high end, right? Because for the high end, you will just figure it out, like people have, regrettably. But like if you go into a low key, you're trying to make something, like you're trying to design a dungeon. If any cast the mob does can just be stopped by some random guy's CC, it's like, okay, well now we have to do a lot of these deadly casts. Otherwise the pack does nothing. I think that's the rationale for what it's worth. Obviously, if you do high keys, then you hate that, but yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like there's got to be a better middle ground. When I go into Mechagon Workshop for the first time with some high level key, and we get to the goop people, and they're like, "Don't let it cast, don't let it cast." It's just I don't like that, but that's okay.
I saw it a lot. Go ahead.
No, I mean I was going to transition us to a different topic. So
go ahead, take us along.
Okay. Well, I did want to go back to the general one just for one more before we continue on to either one more thing for Frost or Fire. But I want to talk about like updated visuals because Shaman's getting that slammed on them, and DK has gotten some recently, and I think that there's a few that really stand out for Mage as would be contenders.
Frost.
I'm fine with Very Frost right now. That's not the urgent one. So I would say, I mean, Degen's also talked about this quite a lot, but like G Pyro, if you tack that onto a Pyroclasm SKB thing, that's going to get people a lot more excited about hardcasting the ability than just shooting out literally a normal looking Pyroblast. It's such like an amazing natural way to use the greater Pyroblast animation. It's ridiculous, honestly, that it hasn't come up as an idea for them. And then I think Arcane, while it has really good visuals, kind of suffers a little bit. Like I think Arcane Blast, obviously, that's a contender. But I also think Arcane Barrage needs a little bit of modernization. It's got a decent visual, and it was definitely strong, through Wrath. for what it looked like. But I feel like there's a way to make it just such an amazing looking spell that would more match, everything else that Arcane has with Arcane Orb and Splinters that just look great. So, and then obviously for Frost, you get like kind of cold Ice Nova. I would also argue that Frostbolt, Ice Lance, and Flurry all look exactly the same. So
it's crazy too because they just redid a ton of these visuals in Legion. It wasn't that long ago that like Arcane Barrage, Ice Nova, all these spells got touched on. Honestly, I think the biggest issue with like Arcane's animations, since you brought that up, is really just size. Like a lot of them are just visually too small to differentiate from other shit going on your screen. Like the barrage bolts, I swear to God, they've gotten 10% smaller every expansion. And it's not that, right? It's just that there's other shit going on that like you just can't even differentiate barrage and missiles from splinters half the time, and there's just like a kind of vomiting of pink at your target a little bit at times. But yeah, no, I couldn't agree more that our barrier, especially Ice Barrier, I think is probably the biggest offender in this category.
And it had the thing in Ruby Life Pools. They had an updated Ice Barrier animation that they could just use, and it looks more similar to like Prismatic Barrier than the current one looks.
Half the Jaina spells from the bod fight could be used for Frost Mage, and that would be a huge improvement too. Or Khadgar and Jaina spells that they used in the open world for Arcane. Like they did some amazing visual animations in Battle for Azeroth that they just left on the ground, right?
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, like I think the mage in general does have like some very good standouts. Like I think Meteor looks great, Glacial Spike, especially mostly when you have the collection thing as well, because for Frostfire Fire it doesn't look too great. But when you have the little bit of delay added onto it, that looks great. Comet Storm, great. Ray Frost, no, sorry.
I know we disagree on that one. It's funny because some of the PvP talents actually look way better than our PvE talents too, right? Arcanosphere and Ice Wall look incredible compared to their like, PvE counterparts.
Ice Wall is the best thing ever added to PvP. So.
Yeah, I'm glad they opened it to all specs. Jen, sorry?
Oh, I saw Billy lighting up. I wasn't sure if he had something.
I know, I forgot. It's fine.
The spider got him.
Actually, okay, I was gonna ask. I actually have never seen this updated visual on the Ice Barrier. Like, I actually am curious which one that is talking about because I remember it for some reason.
It's a very neon, like light blue looking shield. Okay. It almost looks like a prismatic barrier more than it looks like Ice Barrier in some way. But
is it like on the first boss? I don't actually.
No, it's on the trash mobs, right?
Yeah. Oh, the shield that you spell steal. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm remembering it now. Okay. I mean, this one we have right now is the same one as Burning Crusade, so it could definitely.
No. It's the same one as Classic. So
yeah.
Like just like kind of cool.
Grand scheme, like visuals aren't that important. Like gameplay obviously comes first, but monkey brain activate when you see giant meatball going at a target. Like, oh, hold on, my cat is pressing buttons. Okay. When you see like a giant pyro, or you see the Aether attunement missiles like spreading out against 6 mobs, like that makes the button feel good to press. Just because neuron activate, shiny button look cool. And like a lot of the time I don't even notice, like I have visuals turned down, obviously. I don't even see my pyros. My rogue complains about it, but I never see them. I would just love for a little bit more meat on our stuff, especially like Arcane Blast. If you guys ever rode the spell tome from doing the Mage Tower, that he does like the little channel thing, that would look sick.
Yeah. I've always thought Arcane Blast should just be the cannons from the Jaina cinematic in BFA where she has the ghost ship, because those looked pretty cool.
Cannon shout out. Yeah, I do think like in general this is kind of like a shaman thing. Like shamans have gotten a lot of these updated visuals recently, but also they have, we don't really have as many unique casting animations. I feel like it's some of the other specs like Warlock with Chaos Bolt or Lava Burst and whatnot. So it would be nice if they started incorporating a little bit more of those unique cast animations in our specs as well. All right, but bring us back to Frost so we can speedrun it into Arcane. Next topic was going to be dominance of Glacial Spike. And I think Glacial Spike needs to stay. In favor of Frost being a combo spec, there's no combo if it's the same thing every single time. I think that gets a little repetitive and boring. It's essentially what it's Frost without Glacial Spike is just like Sun Fury Arcane, right? It's missiles, blast, blast, missiles, blast, blast, and then you throw a barrage in there in a very scripted way, and that's what Frost would turn into. And I think that something that's come up a lot recently, or that always comes up, I guess, is people are like, "Oh, what's the hardest spec? What's the hardest spec to learn?" And the traditional thing has always been Frost, but in the past expansion, like since Shadowlands through Dragonflight, Fire and Arcane have really been pared down quite a bit. Like they've lost a lot of things that used to go into their spec. Pyroclasm, Rune of Power, all these things, Radiant Spark, used to massively affect them and your rotation. And now they're kind of bare bones. And I don't really want Frost to be that bare bones. I think Fire, especially Sunfree Fire, it's just like it. What is it? It's so simple. There's nothing to do, especially because of hyperthermia. And so I think Glacial Spike kind of needs to stay for that to be true. So.
God,
Okay.
I hate hypothermia.
I'm gonna push back a teeny bit. I agree with you that GS does contribute a lot to the Frost gameplay. My issue with it is that it's 1 point at the bottom of the tree, and it changes your rotation, and you will always take it as long as it's tuned. And if it's ever tuned badly by like happenstance, your rotation sucks. Like your shit just sucks bad, right? The problem is that as long as it exists with that 1 point like mode, it inhibits design change of every other aspect of the kit because so much power is attained through one node. Like my thing is that I was kind of bringing this up earlier about like the mastery dilemma, about how like mastery is the design of the spec. Frost has this issue because like Frost's identity is shattering, right? Like that's Frost's identity. So it's like, how do you have a mastery that like creates that more, that it's not just a percent amp? And so for me, I actually like the very simple bare bones of Frost without GS even. The thing is, it would need a bit more spice to make it not boring. They would obviously need to design stuff to create that to happen. So just like throwing an idea out there is like when you flurry, maybe you get a random number of winter chills, right? And maybe that can like compound in some way. Maybe you can get some other random procs to bring in spice to the game. Other than just like, oh, I have 1 point that I'm always going to take. It's going to increase my damage by 20%. And the rotation's always going to be revolving around it and nothing else. That was my issue of the dominance of GS.
Yeah, and I mean, if it's, we get a talent tree rework, it's kind of moved to be a little bit more of a central focus of the spec. I think there's room for you to lessen its power. It's definitely, in the current iteration, especially for Frostfire next year, too strong, where it leads into like the 40% of your damage, and that's like where Icicles was also pre-Dragonflight rework, and that's too strong, right? And they've shown, especially through like Comet Storm, the way that Comet Storm has been empowered in the past like tier for Frostfire does impact your gameplay in maybe not super large ways, but it's very impactful, right? Now you use Comet Storm as a precast into Flurry, or you'll look for other ways to shatter it and whatnot, and that's not something that Frost was doing before Frostfire. It had kind of been pushed out, and so I think I would like Glacial Spike to be a bit of a baseline. I do agree that if you removed it, you would need something else. But I think there's ways to lessen its power and still get satisfying shatter incentives through other spells as well, while keeping it as a stay.
I think it would actually. Go ahead.
Sorry, I love Glacial Spike in single target. It feels really impactful. I feel like I'm throwing, a big meaty spell. The animation's cool. It like really lends into that like combo builder idea of Frost. I do think the pathing to it could be better, similar to how Fire is almost forced to go through the combust. You can skip it, but it's pretty hard to do. What I don't like is I feel like AoE for Frost is very busy because you're constantly getting those floods of Fingers of Frost. You're getting your orbs. You have to keep your Blizzard rolling, doing your Shatter combo with Comet Storm. I feel like Glacial needs a little bit more incentive or more of a natural point to press it in your AoE rotation. I think it was it Dragonflight season like 2 or 3 had the really cool like shatter effect off of Glacial. I wish that was baseline.
Yeah, it was a mirror still.
Yeah, that being in the talent tree would be good. I mean, the main issue with that in particular was it created an over reliance on like using your freezes because it worked with the Splay Nice one as well. So you need to be very cognizant of how at any one point in time you would shatter both Glacial Spikes when you sent them out. And if you're looking at like reducing Glacial Spike dominance, I think that's good. The other option you have is turn Frost into a little bit of a light builder spender for single target versus AoE, where you have like Frost Bomb as an icicle spender alternative in AoE. But then you become much more of a builder spender, a bit more homogenized, where you're not currently in that area. So I'm, GS Explosion's great, perfect thing onto the talent tree. And even if you wanted to in some way preserve an OGS playstyle, literally the tier before, because I literally like doing this, we had like Flurry Explosions where Flurry did AoE damage, or we have the Ice Lance AoE damage, right? Those are like 3 tier sets all in a row. So there's certainly a choice node that can be made there. And then there's the further design decision if they want to go into icicles can be used for a couple other things.
That's definitely my if I had like an ideal fix for this, in my opinion, I think you pop GS up the tree into the tier 1 actually, and make it a choice node with something that builds around Ice Lance, like Packed Ice or used to, or something along those lines, where you have a more clearly defined like this is like your raid and this is your Mythic Plus option, right? And I think because like from my perspective, I don't know how the Frosty boys think about this, but I fucking hate hitting GS and AoE. It feels like I'm spending 2.5 seconds of just waiting for this thing to come together. And outside of a Mirdrasil, it's not doing the same AoE contribution that I feel the rest of the time, right?
When you do it into a Shatter, I think it's one of the few spells that actually feels satisfying in AoE, right? Like Comet Storm into Ice Nova is a big one. I don't think Cold really replicates that feeling. And Glacial Spike into Ice Nova is a bit of a similar thing. Of course, once you get to larger target counts, it doesn't work quite as well. I think the whole cast time of Glacial Spike is just still a victim of like Frost busy AoE rotation, right? In the current iteration of Blizzard, it has to be castable frequently because you need to be able to move it. And Frozen Orb, kind of a similar idea. And so that's why, it should be long CD Blizzard with no hasted cooldown that is Starfall. And then, once you start de-bloating the AoE rotation a little bit, these long cast times and stuff really gets, a little bit more tolerable. But yeah, if it doesn't do anything in AoE, it makes sense for it to have an AoE alternative or to somehow incentivize that. Because this isn't even like widely spread about, but right, there's always these breakpoints where it's like, okay, you're gonna stop casting Glacial Spike at this point, and your AoE rotation, and it feels super disruptive because you have to go from this mindset of I'm playing around, getting to 5 icicles, and then figuring out how I'm gonna use Glacial Spike to I'm just gonna ignore it. And for me, since we've been playing Glacial Spike for the past 3-4 tiers, I just like my brain doesn't work when I have the icicle weaker on my screen and I'm supposed to ignore Glacial Spike. I just can't do it. But Frostfire would technically do it over like 5 targets currently. So, yeah.
Do you think you like GS more than like what we had in Shadowlands with like Icy Prop and the more Ice Lance focused Frost?
Yeah. Personally, I think it's more satisfying. I really liked Icy Propulsion. But I think that Icy Propulsion, and when I look at it and I see kind of like the effects that it had, and when you think about like skill expression, I think one of Icy Propulsion's main skill expression points was Rune of Power. I don't think that Icy Propulsion itself was really like insane enough for a certain tier of player that playing around it really made you feel very rewarded. I think playing around the Rune of Powers that you got from Icy Propulsion felt incredibly rewarding. And I don't think Ice Propulsion without Rune of Power would really feel quite as impactful. Obviously, people love haste. That's why Winter's Blessing exists. So, yeah, in general, I like Glacial Spike more than Ice Propulsion.
Gotcha. So just make Icy Veins give you 40% more spell damage for 12 seconds after using it.
Yeah. And I mean, I wanted them to remove like all the haste from Icy Veins. I didn't do that, and I feel like every patch now, aside from maybe the first patch, like Corey was saying, I just always feel like I'm just getting too much haste as Frost, even still, because Winter's Blessing is so strong, and then you get less Icy Veins on top of it, and you're like, oh my god. But
I think that's. Sorry, go ahead.
I've always found it funny that they gave what is it, Winter's Blessing, the haste amp to Frost, and then they gave Fire the crit conversion. Like, I feel like if you looked at it from the outside, you would flip that around. Like, Fire go fast, Frost crit.
Yeah, I mean, Frost really doesn't value crit that much right now, unless it's like actually full AoE. But for Fire with how Combust works, it definitely really doesn't make sense to have critical mass. And also, since they did this to Frost and Fire, you'd think they would go full circle and give Arcane a Mastery one, but they haven't done that yet. So, Azuna, were you gonna say something before
I was
I
saying
cut you
Mythic
off?
Clusters just like loved Icy Repulsion back then. Obvious reasons. I was never a fan of Glacial in AoE, so I would like
Yeah.
to see some kind of choice node or like I don't know, some kind of AoE alternative to Glacial, but it felt good in Dragonfly for sure, but I think the current Frostfire, I'm not a fan of pressing Glacial, so I would like to see
I
something different.
I still think the main like value of Ice Propulsion when you're doing like AoE, like in you think Shadowlands, you think the other side, it was the Rune of Powers, right? It's like having permanent Rune of Power
Yeah,
uptime. That's what
yeah.
people loved about it. And it's like yes, the haste was nice, but I don't think that really played as much of an impact in it as much as oh my Rune of Power's ending. Let me press Icy Veins, I got another one, and then just repeat the cycle in AoE forever. But yeah. Okay, so let's move on to probably the last thing we're going to talk about for Frost. Speed through it, get to Arcane. What do you guys think about Frostbolt shattering? You know, do you like all these Frostbolt talents? You know, Frostfire goes into a pack. It's like, okay, let me Blizzard Orb and then just Frostfire Bolt 4 times. Sometimes that includes overtapping your excess buffs, right? And that doesn't really feel good a lot of times. Um, and you know Blizzard has like failed to naturally incentivize Frostbolt because we have such an over bloat of procs in our rotation that we don't press it enough to actually utilize these Frostbolt talents. So they kind of resort to make them strong enough that we have to unnaturally use them, and then you know bolt spam and everything. So
Die DC die. I hate that setup you have to do when you play DC where you enter a pack, you press IV, and then you just spam Frostbolt until you get your stacks, and then you can do damage. I feel like IV as a cooldown should be giving you that damage naturally. You shouldn't need to pre-stack it. This is not Necrolord Frost. I do not want to. I do not want to spam Frostbolt. I think Frostbolt in itself, like it has a natural place in the rotation as your default filler, and you don't actually need to press it that much when you're in like these AOE situations. So kind of being forced into it, it's just unnatural and doesn't feel good to me.
One thing I didn't like about this like DC AoE combo is like the target counts make it really awkward. Like so if you do like 5 targets or like 4 targets, whatever, you Frostbolt 4 times, your orb is not up, and it's like 20-30 seconds away. It feels really awkward when like you do like 10 targets. It's like, oh, it's perfectly up every time. I was never really a fan of that. I think some talents like Frost is probably some of my least favorite talents. Like I'm not a fan of Cold Front or DC like at all. Like these two talents, I wish they would be deleted from the game,
What is
especially from a
the
Mythic Plus perspective.
what's the hate on Cold Front? Like, why do you dislike it?
I
it's
just
we
there's just so much to think about in keys. I mean, for keys at least, it's just so much to think about. And it's like it's almost like Arcane Orb, the annoyance of Arcane Orb. You got to be facing like the front correctly in front of you every time. Where if you're thinking of doing AoE stops or something, and then your cold front procs, it like probably isn't in an ideal spot. It kind of goes back to like how Frozen Orb is just like such a weird spell. Like you can't really get 100% value of it. It's like you can't get 100% value of Cold Front sometimes, at least in AoE and keys.
You also have this weird like difference between Fire and Frost, right? Where Firefall one, it just works a bit better because it's tied to Pyroblast, which is more similar to Ice Lance for Frost than it is to Flurry, and that calls down the Meteor, which is one much stronger than a singular Frozen Orb, and then also has the interactions with Frostfire. So I think they just kind of were content to let Cold Front die, and it's a very weak ability. Quite literally the only reason we ended up taking a talent is because we need it for the tier set to function. Even with the tier set buffing it, you still wouldn't take the talent, most likely, if you didn't have to. You know, one of the benefits it does have is that it actually pushes you out of Death Chill or pushes you out of Comet Storm when you're playing Spellslinger. There's like 4 viable Mythic Plus talent builds next year, which is so strange to think that requiring you to take Cold Front was the golden apple for getting build variety in Frost Mythic Plus. But it's true and it's a little bit silly. But yeah, and then the last thing I want to touch on, right, was about the using Frostbolt instead of Ice Lance. Normally it requires you overcapping quite a lot of Fringe Frost and stuff. A lot of times when I think about it, I personally find it unintuitive to most of your procs. And I would like prefer if they made Shattering Frostbolt just not possible. Like it just wouldn't consume Winter's Chill in the future. Which I guess actually that's degenerate because one of the reasons you Frostbolt is to keep Winter's Chill up. But you wouldn't get any benefit from it. So Yeah.
I honestly, I think that's a good idea. I don't think Frostbolt should be like a primary source of damage. To me, Frostbolt is the quintessential builder for the spec, right? Like it should be generating procs, it should be buffing your other spells, but it shouldn't be like something where you're like, okay, I pop my cooldown, Frostbolt, like no, I'm not excited to do that at all.
I think and Fire has an issue with it too. Frostbolt baseline isn't too bad. Like Spellslinger does have a bolt spam build, but Frostfire is where you really find it because they've packed so many interactions into Frostfire Bolt. And it exists in Fire too, where in like Execute, if you're playing Frostfire, you can almost omit Scorch because the benefits you get from Frostfire Bolt is just so strong. For Frost, it's a relatively easy fix. Like, you can fix the interactions with Winter Chill and affect the Shatter. For Fire, it's a lot harder because it's just a relative value question.
I think Scorch in general has just been so low value. Especially they removed the extra damage it does below 30% to make the scalding the option against improved Scorch, and they should have just kept both of them, and the option against improved Scorch would still be worse. But Scorch just does such a pitiful amount of damage in general. Like it's really sad. I mean, that's on the later period. I do think we should transition. If you guys want to transition to Fire instead of Arcane, we can keep talking about Scorch. But I don't know if Porom was building up his excitement.
I'm totally fine with that. Let's transition into Fire. I think that
Okay.
I think Fire probably got the shittier end of the stick this patch, especially on the tuning front. One more thing I wanted to double back on before we go down that road, though, is there's a bit of a parity mismatch as well between Firefall and Coldfront with how many spells you actually need to trigger it. And that's really always been the worst problem with Coldfront for me, is not only is the orb hard to leverage, as Billy said, but it's also like it takes twice as fucking long to get to it. It's like really just kind of boring. Like that's a full minute of frostbolting just to get that Coldfront proc compared to the Firefall one where it's like, with Fire's level of haste, that's, like 14 seconds of casting, right?
To say something to this, when Coldfront was at least introduced as a legendary in Shadowlands, I don't know its history before that. Shadowlands obviously had Covenants, it had Deathborn, you could multi-target Frostbolt then. It also worked that it didn't have an ICD, so for Flurry, each of the 3 Flurry hits would contribute a count towards Coldfront. So it used to be like 15, like it was for Fire, but 15 when you can cleave your Frostbolts, and each of your Flurries count for 3, makes it go by quite a lot faster than Fire's Firefall. The issue is they then fixed that flurry interaction, mega nerfed Coldfront because it was overperforming in dungeons and beta, and then Frostbolt cleaving is just not great. So that's kind of where it led to where it is now, where it hasn't been touched in 5 years.
All right. Do we want to talk about some Fire? I have the perfect way for us to showcase this. I don't know how well this will display.
I think if you start streaming and people just click into it for a second.
So this is, everyone loves stack sims. There's a couple different Frost builds in here because there's the Bolt Slingers, and I don't feel that those are very realistic for a lot of raid fights. So up here at the top, we have, Frostfire sitting at that nice 6.16. If we cruise all the way down here, we have Unleash Inferno Frostfire, my favorite spec in the game right now, for Fire at least. Chilling right down there with the tanks. The biggest issue with Fire right now is the tuning. It's a very put together spec. Like all the interactions are there, the baseline is there. But Blizzard did this thing where they decided that nobody should play it, and they just kept slapping aura nerfs on it. Sunfury Fire is doing okay. It's kind of middle of the pack. It's got the turbo movement. But SKB Frostfire, Unleash Inferno Frostfire are just absolutely in the dumpster. And every time they keep trying to tune Sunfury to make it, kind of middle of the pack, but still have that cleave niche, they keep killing Frostfire more. And they just keep beating that dead horse until it's in the dirt.
something I want to say about this is, Frostfire was obviously performing pretty well in PTR before they got mega nerfed, and I think that they were just very scared of its cleave potential. And I want to kind of harken back a little bit. Obviously, Fire has like its major issue is always how strong is Ignite versus how strong is Fire, and then they just don't want Ignite to be too strong, and so they end up like kind of gutting it because they're afraid of it. And I think this was, if we think back to Dragonflight, a bit silly. Because when you think about the Dragonflight rework, right, the things they wanted to address for Fire was we want Ignite to be less of a overpowering option, right? Because that's what you were playing all the time, and it essentially took Arcane's role of the massive priority damage. And so the Dragonflight rework for Fire was like, let's make Arcane or Ignite less prevalent, and they didn't really do that. Like they didn't really succeed, and I think that was a failure. And slight Frost add-in here was when they removed Icy Propulsion, and that was ostensibly to help Frost get more performance in competitive raid environments, and that also didn't really work because Frost needs a niche. But yeah, so for Fire, they instead, they just added like Living Bomb, which worked well with the Ignite playstyle still, and I think they need to find a bit of a more permanent solution to Ignite for this to not be them crazy over nerfing it. Because it would have been amazing for Frostfire Fire to be the play next year.
I mean, they have the solutions though. Like they're just not like Controlled Destruction and Intensifying Flames. Both are the exact solution to this. They just did them weird. Controlled Destruction increasing the damage of Ignite on spread target Ignite makes no sense to me, like at all. Like if I stack my Controlled Destruction on one guy, why is the Ignite I'm spreading to other targets also amplified? That just shouldn't work. Same thing with Intensifying Flames, like the number being that low instead of them nerfing base Ignite and then buffing Intensifying, like those are two great knobs to buff Ignite on single target, but nerfing them on like AoE, right, which is the main issue. But they just, this is the thing, like they have these great ideas, and they had this with Living Bomb as well, as you noted. And then they just leave them, and they just never touch them again. It's so perplexing. They have a perfect vision, and it's like, I remember like reading the Living Bomber arc, I'm like, oh my god, they get it. They're so good with this, they're right. And then 3 weeks later, what just happened? I got whiplash. My spec now sucks. I have 7-8 dead talents. The spells that were supposed to do their job are precisely doing the opposite of their job. It's so strange. I don't, it feels like some guy came in, he did his job, but then he left, and then someone else took over and was trying to pick up the pieces. I don't get it.
I can't recall the last time they touched Intensifying Flame. I know they just did Controlled Destruction, and I didn't even know that Controlled Destruction applied to all the targets. But yeah, if that was single target only, that would have been much better, a better solution. And they aren't using Intensifying Flame as a tuning solution. And since Controlled Destruction applies to everything, it feels more like an aura nerf than it should be to Ignite. But.
And we were all celebrating when they did this rework and they created these two knobs, because we're like, okay, finally they're going to make they have the tools there. They can finally like tune Ignite down and make Flame Strike relevant. And they just never have. And they have touched Intensifying Flames, I think, once since it was implemented. It went from like 15 to 25 and then back down or something like that. But they just keep doing these aura nerfs and bump it up 3%, bump it down 3%. Okay, we're 8 weeks in the tier, Fire can be played again. And it like for you saying, it's just ridiculous to me that they built these great tools and now they just refuse to use them, and instead they target baseline. And I think the issue goes deeper in the fact that Ignite is tied to our mastery, right? So anytime Ignite's good, it makes Mastery good. Anytime they nerf Ignite, it reduces the value of that, and we start going back into Verse. We talked about that a little bit with Frost, too. I really think that it is such a tuning issue for them, and it has the potential for such strength that they need to decouple our Mastery and Ignite. Just make our Mastery like a flat modifier on hot streaks or something like that, so that they can just say, okay, X amount of your damage is Ignite. Because I think as it exists right now, it is too complex for them to rein in all aspects of game without these wild tuning waves back and forth.
I mean, they can give it the Frost treatment as well, right? Where they can keep the Ignite on the Mastery if they want, but like tune it down and then introduce a secondary effect to the Mastery, right? Like you were saying. Just add an extra spell in there, like, okay, Pyro Blood damage increased by X. Yeah.
Yeah, don't increase flame strike damage. Yeah, that sounds good.
Or living bomb, right?
Yeah, or
That's the
living bomb,
thing, like,
honestly.
even our flame strike contributes to ignite. It's a very big portion of our damage when we're using flame strike. So even if you're trying to lean into flame strike, ignite is still there. It's still a tuning issue. It doesn't.
And
get
they mark
those
with the Fire Lord that they can easily adjust like in concert with the basic night changes to prevent from really hurting our AOE. So they have the kind of 3 perfect tune knobs. Right?
I think they've just kind of designed themselves into a hole here.
It's interesting because they have the same problem with Ignite, essentially with tuning knobs that they have with Living Bomb and Flame Strike, and they're all in competition for the exact same role in the Specs kit. And it almost seems like if they're so jaded and scared of Ignite after Nyalotha and after Liberation of Undermine, right? Maybe the right play is, like Forgy said, like draw it back, put more power into Flame Strike or Living Bomb and focus on those. But it definitely, to that point, it definitely seems like they're just not willing to use the tuning knobs they have in place, you know?
Yeah.
But they're scared of it, but then they built a tier set for Frostfire where, okay, let's make all these other things contribute to Ignite. Oh, Frost doesn't have Ignite modifiers. Weird. Like they keep leaning into it, but then getting scared of it and pulling it back, and then fire goes into every single tier except for the last one, tune 10% under, and we wait till week 8 for them to buff it up.
I just think it's crazy that they didn't go for Frostfire Orb. I mean, I guess there wasn't parity in there. I mean, the Glacial Spike tier set's good for Frost and Fire thematically, but still, Frostfire Orb.
Don't curse me with an orb, man, please. Don't curse me with an orb.
Fucking flame.
So instead of Orb, we'll bring back Cinderstorm, right?
No, we do not do that.
Someone said in chat, give Flame Strike the at target option, and I would highlight that as kind of, it's silly that the spec that has the most to do off GCD that prevents it from like actually well targeting spells sometimes. It needs to use the mouse over with Flame Strike, and then you have other specs that have comparatively much less going on that get the at target option.
For context, Sun Fury Fire, which is probably what's going to be played if it's played at all, is sitting around 93.5 APM sim-wise. Most specs sit around that 50 to 60, some creep up towards 65. Fire is fast.
Yeah.
In AoE, if you're flame striking, you are flame striking at 93 APM when you need to keep your cursor centered on your screen. And Lord help you if you need to flick over and do a kick or reset your focus or anything else or decurse somebody. Like, just give us the at target. It's going to be the worst option. But
someone just said that mages are now the only caster that doesn't have it as an option because Ellie has it, Destro has it, and Esprit has it, which does seem true. So that's
and
for
add to that as well.
Fire
Mage casts Flame Strike more in its rotation than any of those specs cast those spells either. Like it's like 2 to 1 or something to Earthquake or something like that when I last looked. So it, and when you think about how that impacts player performance and quality of life, like no wonder we can't go off Ignite, right? Like Flame Strike's a pain in the ass to use because of that.
This is kind of the same thing I said about the Frozen Orb functionality, right? Because we use it a lot more than Tropic Rift and Ravager, and it's a bit more core to it. And it feels like maybe Blizzard trying to preserve this mythos that Mage requires, like it needs more intricacies for its skill usage, right? You have to cast Flame Strike at target because Mage is supposed to be like more of a high skill spec versus the other specs it's okay with, and like orb is supposed to be a high skill ability, so it can't have this quality of life functionality. I think that doesn't quite mesh with the rest of the classes.
And someone just pointed out in chat very accurately, if you use the 1 button rotation, your Meteor and Flame Strike is at target. They have that functionality already built in. They just refuse to give it unless you're using the one button.
That is crazy. I did not know that. That is actually criminal. Like it.
You've got to wonder, like, if you're
Oh,
if you're a
shit.
relatively low skill player and you're having trouble with the targeting reticule, it might be worth it to swap between the one button rotation and normal keybinds and incur the extra GCD just to get it at target without having to deal with that. It's
And,
just kind of funny.
It's so bad. Like, whenever I play these specs with the at target, I never consider using like Shadow Crash at target because it's like just aim it better. You don't cast it that often. I would absolutely turn on Flame Strike at target. No question asked. Like, it's so ridiculous. The amount of times you have to play in a key with like the most scuffed camera angle because you just don't have the time to change your camera while weaving like Flame Strike IB, Flame Strike I. It's absurd. It's so bad.
It makes your movement like super weird too. Gotta move my character very weird and I have to keep my in the same spot. I hate it so much. Like Mythic Plusers hate this so much. It's so bad.
I spend most of my time in Ultra Time sitting in the fire, and anytime Flame Strike becomes good, the number one question that gets asked, other than what stat, how much haste, is there an at target, or can I play Pyro? I hate pressing Flame Strike. Like anytime Ignite's good, I never hear anyone saying, "Man, I really wish I could press some Flame Strikes right now." It's always the opposite. I don't know. I feel like that's a design fail, and I hate pressing Flame Strike.
Oh yeah, Cinder
To
Brew
their
first
point-
pull. I'm hitting the muscle guy with Pyro. I don't give a fuck.
To their point, maybe Fire needs a little bit more of the distinction between Flame Strike and Power Blast because it really is just the same button if you make it at target, right? The functionality is maybe a little bit of Ignite spreading, but without the differentiation between needing to actually aim your Flame Strike, you're just doing the exact same thing. So
It used to not be this bad. In the before times, back in I think it was Shadowlands, we didn't have Fuel the Fire, which is the passive effect that makes Flame Strike contribute to Hot Streak. So in your Combust, you would have functionally 2 GCDs, 1 to 2 GCDs between every Flame Strike, because you either do like IB Flame Strike or IBPF or PFPF or Scorch or whatever. So you'd have like 2 generators between every Flame Strike. So they functionally doubled the amount of Flame Strikes you have to cast, and then also up the amount of resources you have so you can cast more of them. And then you're also in Combust more. So you're just constantly sitting there with your cursor dead center.
Yeah, the comment about like it feeling the same as Pyroblast if you have the at target, that is fair, and I think that's like a good point. My only thing is like it is a band-aid fix because I think a lot of specs do feel kind of boring. Like if we're being honest in AOE, right? Like you look at any spec in the game, the vast majority of them, your AOE spenders are just kind of boring, right? Like Frost is a little bit unique because they have like a little bit of a mix between like AOE and single target. But a lot of specs are just like, okay, I'm going to press like Earthquake instead of like Elemental Blast. If you spec like that Echoes of Sundering, you can do both. But like Rain of Fire is Rain of Fire. What does Shadow Priest do? They do their single target rotation. All the rogue specs that have like Nimble Flurry or like Blade Flurry, you're just pressing the single target rotation as well. Like, I don't know. I think AOE at the end of the day is a little bit boring for the majority of the time. The problem is for Fire, it's boring and it feels bad to play, right? Like,
yeah.
you gotta start somewhere. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I think that's a very fair take on that.
I think this is going to take a while, so why don't we start talking about CDR?
Oh,
yeah.
You want to go first, Forgy?
I'll let you go because I think you're a more UI enjoyer than I am. So
don't get me wrong. I like SKB. Back when we first started like this iteration of Fire, which I'll call season like 3 of Shadowlands, which is when we really started leaning into the idea of Fire is constantly building towards Combust, being in Combust, and having these resource generations increased. Thank you, Fiery Rush. Every patch, they add another way of reducing Combust cooldown or increasing your resources so that you're getting back to combustion faster. If you open the spell tree and hit or search for CDR in it, like every node lights up. That is all of our talents. All of our talents are just reskinned versions of cooldown reduction. A lot of it comes from Kindling. Like Kindling's our main generator of CDR. which is fine. Kindling's been in the game a long time. It used to be a choice note with Pyroclasm, which was kind of nice because you would pick between basically a minute mage or a 2-minute mage, and the relative strength of your combustion would reflect that. But since the end of Shadowlands going into Dragonflight, we've just been stuck in this rabbit hole similar to Frost Icy Propulsion, where we are just constantly chasing the next combustion. We are fighting for CDR. Anytime we can't target something and build that CDR, we lose a lot of value. We lose a lot of damage. Anytime someone calls a DPS stop, which for some reason has been prevalent in all these raids, we're hemorrhaging damage. And there's just no choice against it. I don't mind that this version of Fire exists. There's a very large section of the player base that enjoys chasing the combust, constantly being in combust, brain go burr. But I think for the health of the spec and for my sanity, Fire needs choice options in here. I would love to see a choice on Kindling back with Pyroclasm or anything else that would put damage back into combust without reducing the cooldown. Throw a rune in there. I'd be down for it. And they keep saying we want to, dial back the resources or dial back some of the cooldown. And then they do things like build this tier set, which bumps out your hyperthermia to 30 seconds. Or they introduce Unleash Inferno, which is supposed to be our competitor towards SKB, which is the uptime fire. But then they slap a massive CDR bonus on it. I'll say 20 seconds per combustion. I don't know. I feel like they've devolved into like this rabbit hole that they can't design themselves out of. What do you think,
Isn't
40?
Sorry, I just want to say, isn't it been saying that you need CDR on top of a 70% damage amp for Unleash Inferno?
That's absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bad because, like, I 100% agree. Like, the fact that, like, having played this game such a long time, and I know Manather will remember this, like, the reason they removed Icy Propulsion was this exact issue of, like, if you ever have to do anything except hit buttons in your Icy Veins, which at the time was, like, super high uptime, was, like, 100% ideally, you just bleed damage, and that's really problematic for a spec's health. And then they gave it to IUI. Like, if you ever have to do anything in your combustion other than DPS right now, goodbye. Like, you're just, it's gone. Like, if you've played One-Armed Bandit and you pop a combust, which is like 35-40% uptime, and then you get I need to drop the big hit in the back of the room out of range of anything, or I have to dispel my fire debuff. Okay, I guess my combustion is gone, and then my next combustion is gone, is delayed, and like my timings are all different now, and it's just super, super frustrating to have to deal with. Especially because, like, you're getting the CDR, you're chasing the combustion, you're excited, you pop it, and then you're disappointed. Like, if it wasn't the fact that you're actually chasing this power window that, like, feels ultra bad when it gets interrupted, if it was just, like, general interruption throughout the rotation that was, like, equally bad at any given moment, that wouldn't feel as bad. It just feels like, okay, I have to do some chore or something. But yeah, highly agree. Like, the CDR on UI needs to go. Some of our other stuff has to be changed. I think this all returns to, like, my big point about Fire is that, like, we just need a new effect. And I think Pyroclasm is that exact effect. Fire just is too flat, too boring. Flat, not damage-wise, but, like, in terms of, like, conceptually. There's just nothing going on. And so whenever they want to add power to the spec, it's just either increased damage or CDR. Because there's just nothing else that they can affect.
I feel like this arms race, though, started when they combined Pyroclasm and SKB. SKB was already strong enough on its own, and when you combine both of them, it just became insane. And that's why UI has to have such this insane modifier, is because it's competing with SKB, which is arguably probably the strongest node in the game. And it's just, I think one of the issues is Sunking's Blessing. And the other thing to look at is, like, Fire constantly chases Combust uptime because it doesn't feel good to play outside Combust. And I think its Combust rotation is solid, but when you look at its filler and outside Combust, there's a lack, right? It's not a good rotation there. And so that's why it has to constantly chase all this Combust uptime so it can get to the point where it's actually a well-functioning spec. Personally, yeah, love to see Pyroclasm come back. And I think SKB should just go away. I don't think it should exist anymore. It's definitely been fun to have, but similar to whatever that was for Boomies that they got rid of, they gave them their thing incarnation. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
Pulsar.
Ravenous Frenzy.
Pulsar. Yeah, Arcane Pulsar. Because they got rid of that, like this expansion, right?
But
and I think they should do.
I feel like most Boomkins would say that was a mistake, though. That's the thing. Like, a lot of people who play Boomkin feel like the spec is actually just hollow outside of their Pulsar. Like, the only saving grace for Boomkin having fun right now is like a double charge Incarn. The spec feels utterly so boring. It's so bad. Like,
I really feel like a lot of what would solve this is simply removing the CDR from UI and converting it to a lower combustion period cooldown, right? So one of the big issues with this, right, is that you're punished for any moment that you're not doing damage, and by lowering combustion's cooldown directly, you're really shortening the gap there on how much you're punished for that. And I think that would probably put this in a much more balanced position, at least, to where you're, if you're, to Forgy's point, if you have to run out on one-armed bandit to go drop puddles, and you miss 3 globals from it, and you're like, fuck, my combustion's not going to come up for, 20 seconds after it's supposed to, and that's going to affect all my other combustions. If it's not as heavy CDR focused, and some of that's just flatly given to you, right, that does course correct some of that, right?
it does, but then you're still facing the problem of, like, both specs have the same identity of high combustion uptime. I think, like, what the UI enjoyers would want is like the actual old combustion of just like convert the CDR and UI to just a higher damage window. Let me have a boring filler. Like, I'll take a boring filler because then when I pop combustion, I'm gonna be turbo blasting.
Yeah,
like,
just give me Nihilotha fire back, right?
Right.
No, not even that. Like I am a big proponent of bring back burst fire. But Manather, I have to disagree with you. I don't think it was combining SKB and Clasm because yes, that is tremendously strong. This all started with Fiery Rush, which was our tier set in Sofa.
Yeah, Sepulcher.
Yeah. That Fiery Rush just generating so much resources allows you to do so much more within these combustion windows. So you're not having to scorch, you're not having to like be conservative. Even if you go in pretty dry on resources, you're going to generate them back at a much quicker pace. So that combined with the additional uptime that like SKB provides or Unleash CDR, just creates like this degenerate gameplay loop where you can spend freely in your filler. Your filler doesn't matter. It's functionally the same as your combustion. So I think Fiery Rush is like the biggest offender for this power creep. And it's probably something that needs to die, or at least be heavily taxed.
I mean, people love the like the wrist wraps, and I was thinking like, especially if you remove Fiery Rush, I think it would be good. I don't know if having off GCD, active button in Fire's talent tree that would just mimic the wrist wraps would be good, or even just say it always gives you back 2 Fire Blast charges. Maybe that stays with the overinflation of resources. But having more control over that, so it always occurs like in your combustion while removing where the passive regeneration might help fix that without removing too much of the feeling of a full combustion.
Well, so people
we have spontaneous combustion at home, man.
People love the wrist wraps, but in reality, they're like 0.6% better than a normal pair of wrist wraps. The reason they like them is because instead of pressing Phoenix Flames, which feels awful to press compared to Fire Blast, they can just press more Fire Blast. Now, no travel time, no clunky burb. They get more of the fun button.
I will say though, okay, I agree with your general point. My only thing is I don't think Fire Rush necessarily has to go. I think that you could nerf Fire Rush in virtue of nerfing combustion. Because obviously Fire Rush is only active in combustion, so by having less combustion uptime, you're gonna have necessarily less like resources, right? So like in a 2-minute world spec, 2-minute mage or whatever, your Fire Rush is gonna be pretty weak overall. It's gonna be good in virtue that it's gonna give you resources when you're like Omega strong, but like it's not gonna do anything out for the 1 minute and 45 seconds outside of that. For me, I think the issue all stems into like this idea of like UI gives CDR, and so you just have combustion all the time and you have an insane amount of CDR, right? It's like combustion's cooldown is affected like 30, 40 seconds. Where you also still have combustion for like 14 or 15, and then you have hypothermia, blah blah. And then for SKB, you still have real combustion, which feels really odd to me because it's like real combustion feels shit compared to SKB. So my thing is like, if I had to do anything with fire, it's combustion SKB choice node, and then UI pyroclasm choice node at the bottom. So it's like, you can choose, okay, I want to be combusting often, and then I'm either going to have stronger combustions, or like this RNG, like pyroclasm gameplay, which might have some fun filler. Or I could have like short combustion with either the omega strong combustion, or like the chance to do like 2 gazillion pyros, right? Because the other thing, like Manather mentioned about like the pyroclasm merge, in Legion, when the pyroclasm and the bracers were there, when you press those bracers, you could see it. Like your meters, like I looked at some of my VODs from Legion, you would press a pyroclasm in combust, you actually go from like 14th to like 9th. From one pyro. It hits so hard. And right now it's like half of a GS. Well, like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? It's like, what, this spell does nothing. So this merge that they did, they had to nerf it so much because you just had SKB so often that you could just have an extra pyroclasm, just double the value. You know what I mean? And actually just nerf it in other ways to preserve the different identity between the two builds. For me, I think that's like the biggest thing. It's just we need 2 different identities, and that has to be made explicit through like choice nodes.
To give some context to people not familiar with 4D, he was a tempered flames enjoyer, as you might have been able to tell from all this nonsense of no combust, give me pyroclasm SKB.
Yeah.
So I agree with a lot of what you're saying. We do need choice nodes. I think kindling needs to be one of those choice nodes for like a relative power and like to really drive away some of that CDR. But what a lot of people don't talk about, or some people do, with Unleashed and Sun Fury is that you are playing hyperthermia. I'd have to look, but I want to say you get around 25%. That feels like a realistic number. 25% uptime on an average pool of hyperthermia. So you have 40-45% combustion uptime, which is really high, and then you stack 25% hyperthermia on top. That's 70% of your rotation accounted for. Hyperthermia is functionally fake combustion.
Yeah.
And our tier set for Sun Fury this go around is hyperthermia focus. It creates the memory of Alar, where your bird dismisses, you get the predictable hyperthermia. It extends that out, which just feeds more into that CDR loop, and it's also making you not have to spend resources to get that CDR. So you come out of the hyperthermia window, then you can spend all your resources, and then hey, look, another hyperthermia proc, and then combustion.
Yeah, it's like what I've described it in the past is like this descending versions of combustion, where you go from like, I'm in real combustion, and then I'm in like hyperthermia, kinda real, kinda fake combustion, and then you exit hyperthermia and it's like, oh, I still have a ton of resources, still kinda real, kinda fake combustion because I'm just still pressing PF, IB Pyro, or like, and then you're like, oh, 5-10 seconds of fireball spam. Guess what? You can proc a hyperthermia now again, and it's like, and then you're back in real combustion. You're just gambling these like constant versions of combustion that is just watered everything down, and it just feels bad, and it's taken away from this identity of like, oh, my combustion is a real cooldown that feels good to be in, as opposed to oh, thank God I'm in combustion because I'm not doing my fireballs, right?
Segue that a little bit here. They reworked hyperthermia with the patch. So if anyone's not paying attention, you now get a stacking damage modifier on your pyroblast when you're in hyperthermia. I believe it's 20% per stack, up to 150%. That sounds somewhat right. I did the math a while ago. That sounds really strong. Like 150% pyroblast sounds really strong until you realize that UI is 70%. So it takes you 4 or 5 pyroblasts to just get up to that baseline of UI. Most hyperthermia windows are, I think it's 5 or 6 seconds. They keep changing it on me.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to the end of your natural hyperthermia window, you're almost competing with with Unleashed Inferno.
And the crappy thing about that is even if you do get a hyperthermia proc after that, the buffs reset, right? When you lose the first hypothermia, so you can't even continue it out from there. I'm really curious, Asuna, what do you think about the CDR discussion? We haven't heard from you on this, and I think an M plus take here might be a bit more varied from a more raid-centric take.
Like just like how fire just relies on like perma CDR, right?
Yeah.
It was definitely a big problem because of time anomaly. I think it also is just like turns you to like a big uptime spec where you're kind of decentivized to just like press goal or defensives, like all your defenses are on the GCD or all your, AoE stops. You have a lot of them, so you want to press them, and sometimes it just makes your damage very variant versus like when all three of those are combined, like time anomaly, defensives, and AoE stops. It just makes your damage like kind of frustrating sometimes because it has like a big swing. So I wasn't a fan of it. Not sure the best solution, but it definitely feels bad when you are just so reliant on CDR and you just have to do so much that are on the global.
Would you have any preferential changes that might address that issue for you?
I think just going back to a big burst combustion kind of. I mean, I hate to say it, but like BFA kind of nailed it decently well. It's either that or like just old SKB. But like I think the Sun Fury build is really punishing towards like the CDR thing and trying to do stops and stuff. But I just think like different versions of Fire did it better than the one we have now. It's like a big burst combust would help a lot too.
Awesome. Do we want to touch on another subject here? I think I see some highlighting going on execute, and I definitely was interested in this one because it's a royally screwed up take that Fire does worse execute than Arcane. Like historically, that's never been the case until we got into Dragonflight, really, and it's kind of fallen off a cliff for Fire when it comes to execute damage. I think it was like 15 or 18%, something like that at the end of BFA, and then throughout the course of Shadowlands, it kind of stayed static. And in Dragonflight, if I remember right, it right out of the gate of Dragonflight, it dropped to like 8% or something like that, and it hasn't really recovered, right?
So Fire execute, we naturally gain some execute because we can now use Scorch. In execute, Scorch is your guaranteed crit. Because of our resource overflow, that's kind of lost some value because we have the resources to naturally crit without Scorch a lot of the times. Combine that with the fact that Scorch kind of hits like you're gently blowing in their ear, and it takes a 2 talent point investment to even make it functional, and your execute is kind of non-existent. And then recently discovered some of our execute modifiers like Molten Fury don't affect Ignite. Ignite in single target is anywhere between like 20 and 40% of your single target, depending on stats and all that goodie. So just not having that 8% modifier on your Ignite is a pretty big nerf to that function. But a lot of it comes down to the relative value of Scorch and the resource competition that we have.
Yeah, I think like on top of this, to make this matter worse, is like you pointed out, Porom, like the real moment where things just went really bad was Dragonfly, and that's no coincidence, as Manather touched on earlier. Like the splitting of improved Scorch and Scald has made Scorch itself do absolutely pitiful damage. The fact that they are a choice node is so bizarre to me because even if they were combined, our execute would still not be that good. That's the funny thing. It's like it actually does so little damage. If you look at the numbers, on single target, a Scorch does 1/10 of a Phoenix Flame. Not even a Fire, 1/10 of a Phoenix Flame. And to compound this issue, when you look at Frostfire Bolt in comparison is buffed, and they've been continuously buffing Frostfire. I forget which one it is. It's either Burst or Infusion. It's the one that happens randomly. Burst, right? That doesn't proc from Scorch randomly for some reason, but it procs on every other spell. And the Burst happens on pretty much every ability, and Burst does more damage than Scorch. Like, if Burst works with Scorch, and you press Scorch, like 25% of that global's value is the Scorch itself, 75 would be the burst, that 75 is missing. So it's just this insane amount of stacking like L's for Scorch execute, to the point that now like Frostfire prefers to press Frost Firebolt and execute instead of the guaranteed crit Scorch. Like you maintain the improved Scorch to some extent, but it's like, okay, as soon as that's up, I'm done. Like my unique executability, I don't want to use it anymore. I'm going back to my filler Frost Firebolt. Like, it is one of the most ridiculous things on the spec to me. It's so absurd.
So one of the things that I think is really strange is when they went to Dragonflight and they gave you Improved Scorch. Improved Scorch was just probably the worst thing they could have done, because you already want to naturally cast Scorch. You already like casting Scorch and Execute. Improved Scorch is a way to force you to do it as soon as you hit Execute. And that just hasn't like sat right with me. On top of the fact that it's per target, that's a big issue. I think Fire's Execute is much weaker due to that fact, and also just because they funneled the execute value into Improved Scorch, which made Scorch worse, which made the button that you really like pressing not feel as good. And I think that's like go back to the drawing board, maybe lean more into Molten Fury instead, because Scorch is already a good enough button on its own. People love pressing it. You don't want it to be weaker due to these talents that you created, which is what they did. And I don't want to get like too much into the discussion yet, but Arcane probably should not have gone Execute in Dragonflight, and that's definitely just like a larger issue of Dragonflight in general, was to fill out these talent trees. They added a lot of, I don't want to say bloat, but they filled out a lot more of class capabilities, and certainly classes are a lot more homogenized in what they can do in a post Dragonflight world versus before Shadowlands. And it definitely would be smart, I think, for Fire to lean more into the Execute ideal, and Arcane to get away from that. Arcane probably needs something in addition to Funnel, I think. I mean, it has its burst, it has Funnel, maybe that's enough. But Fire certainly excelling in Execute would be great.
I want to push back against like the Molten. I do prefer if they lean into Scorch itself more, specifically because of the fact that one really cool part of the fact that Scorch is your execute is that it increases the cadence and frequency of how many hot streaks you're casting, and that just increases the frequency of a lot of your other things. So for example, like back in Legion, one of the really nice parts about the execute back then was that you were scorching, so you got a hot streak like every 2 GCDs, which was pretty rare back then, right? We didn't have those, which increased like the proc rates of Pyroclasm and stuff. So there was like this cadence, or this like cascade, sorry, of these extra procs that you're getting in execute, not just, oh, my Scorch does extra damage and more pyros. Which is why I kind of prefer like the Scorch angle as opposed to like the Molten Fury angle. I just think Scorch needs an insane amount of buffs. Like I'm talking like put the Scald back in there, buff it by like another 100%. Like do more stuff to Scorch, because this spell feels ridiculously bad to press. The only reason we feel okay pressing it is because it's fast and hot streak. But the thing is, a lot of our specs don't even want to press it in combustion as a filler, right? Like you'll just press Frost Firebolt in combustion as the filler, because it just does no damage. Like it's so, I don't know. Like yeah, I'm not a fan of Scorch at all. Like
I guess I more meant that I think Improved Scorch is kind of toxic. It turns what is a feels good button into a kind of a maintenance button, and by virtue of Scorch providing this strong damage debuff, it like needs to be weaker baseline. And so I just don't like that, and it feels like that's maybe part of the reason why they keep Scorch just such a terrible spell power coefficient.
Yeah, so some numbers for you. The spell power coefficient for Scorch sits about 0.23. For comparison, a Fireball is about 1.2 to 1.3, depending on the buff cycle. Frost Firebolt's a little bit higher than that. So it's roughly 1/5 the damage of a Fireball. It's a slightly reduced cast time. But even with that said, with Scald, 300% of 0.23, you get up to about 0.65, 0.7. That's not a lot.
It's funny too, because I really think the solution to this is it doesn't even have to happen in the spec tree. It could happen in the hero talent tree. We have Sun Fury Execution, and it's amazing that talent isn't taken, because you don't even hit 5 spears as Sun Fury Fire most of the time, right? Like most of the time you hit 3 spears before you hit combustion again. So you don't even get really that much benefit from Savor the Moment, I think it's called, the other choice node in that. And so you could really, there's a lot of room to buff the crap out of Sun Fury Execution for fire to shore up some of the distance between those points, right? And then then you have got one hero tree that's more leaned into the Frostfire Bolt, and then you've got one that still utilizes that execution, right?
I think the saver, like the execute one, shares with the combustion increased duration one, which is
Yep.
whereas like the 5 sphere one shares with the ignite the future, which is like the extra mana cascade thing, which I was actually funnily looking at for like to see if there's any damage value. Because you're right, you don't hit 5 spheres. The funny thing is, it's still good because you start the fight with 5 spheres, so you don't actually ever hit 0. You just go down to like 2 and then you charge back up. So it's almost like you just have 2 extra spheres permanently. Which is kind of odd. But I do like your cook of like that talent, the execute talent, not being ever utilized. That's a great place to put it in, right? Like just make execute good through that. Yeah, I don't know. Like Scorch needs Jesus. Like it needs every god of every religion. It's so bad.
I'm going to segue us away from Scorch because we very clearly hate it.
Well,
And
we hate the current iteration. We love Scorch.
yes, thank you. And I'm going to direct this one specifically to Billy because he is our Mythic Plus Bane. The man lives in Keys.
Yep.
Do you feel like fire is overly punished by the positioning of the tank or the mobs compared to the other specs you play?
I think they kind of like drove us away from Flame Patch, right? Like I don't think it's that bad. No, I don't. Not as nearly as much as Frost. Like I'm used to Frost, so like you get really punished from the tank moving. But like, I mean, I don't think positioning matters too much as fire. At least even with Flame Strike, because usually, I mean, especially in this meta, because like we have VDHs, so maybe a little bit spoiled with that, but they kind of grip everything. But I don't think it's punished too much. The positioning.
So what I hate, and I don't do very many keys upfront about that. Cinderbrew, perfect example. The muscles, those are like the prio target in a lot of groups.
Yeah.
And you're hammering into this guy, you're building your CD, and then he sprints 20 yards down the hallway, and you're just Yeah, I
mean, there is definitely there's not much you can really do about that, but usually like high keys, they kind of play in a way where that doesn't happen, but it's kind of something that will happen in pugs, or you press your GI and then your GI meteorites just like hit one mob versus 10 mobs, so it's definitely punishing in that way. But fire has gotten better in that over time, because usually sometimes you would spam flame strike and you have flame patch, you have to pray they live in the flame patch the whole time, but it's definitely gotten better over time.
I feel like
it used to be a lot more frustrating.
I feel like Arcane's the spec that freaks out when a mob runs out of the pack and it's got your touch on it.
Yeah.
That is actually like a world war for sure. Like, that is the new dungeon that they introduced, Ecodome or whatever, like the 8th dungeon. There's like 3 different types of mobs that leap out. So like, the new dungeon will definitely give us that kind of feeling where if a mob leaps out, you're just so mad. But it's gotten better for fire for sure. Like it's most like Frost. Just I have such a problem with Frost and the hiding of mobs and mobs leaping out.
All right, I'm gonna pivot the question just a little bit, because this is something that new mages specifically like to parrot, or they blame a lot of their fallacies on. How much do you feel punished by the pacing of your group, like your tank specifically chaining mobs in as fire?
It just like depends on the random timings of combustion, right? Like fire is always looking at how long mobs live to decide if you combust or not again. So it's always just like depending on the health of mobs. If you're constantly chaining, it's actually nice as fire because it makes it easy. You just always can just resend. But a lot of the time, it's just like depending on the HP of the mobs to make the decision of fire, because you don't want to send a combust too late, or else you can't farm it back, kind of thing. It goes back to the CDR thing in a way.
A lot of like newer fire mages who aren't really like used to being able to predict the combustion, they have a lot of issues like knowing when to send, when to hold. Like default fire, you're always sending. You just press the button, you have the button, you send it. I think a lot of mages struggle to know, like especially in pugs, should I press my button here? The mob's at 30%. I don't know if my tank's going to chain, and that goes back into the CDR chase rabbit hole. But I feel like Fire's in a really awkward position where you're depending on haste and bloodlust and PI. Your cooldown's so variable. It could be 30 seconds. It could be 45, 50. I don't know. It feels bad in keys for me to play.
I think.
No, it's what's up?
I was gonna say, I will say, like, part of this is down to, like, the fantasy versus reality element of the spec, right? Where, like, a lot of the casuals, like, that I've ever, like, talked to or, like, seen, like, their experience in keys and they're ending up holding combustion, it's because they feel like, okay, I need to hold this to be useful next pack. The problem is, like, when you recognize that when you are the CDR spec, you're not popping the cooldown to do big dam, you do it popping the cooldown to not do 0 dam, right? And like that's the issue. It's like you're avoiding the troughs as opposed to like optimizing the peaks. So then the choice becomes like, I'm popping the combustion not to do big dam, but it's like, am I holding or not? Becomes, is the pack living long enough that I'm gonna get most of the CDR out of it, right?
So I want to transition just a little bit. Someone had asked in chat, how do you guys feel about hero talents for Mage as a whole? And then after that, I'd like to go to Arcane. But in response to this question, I think in general, there's like always in classes when you're kind of within one identity, you get a little bit negative about some things. But I've been playing Warlock a lot recently because that's going to be my split ult next year. And when I'm playing Warlock, I honestly just don't really feel their hero talents. Like they have some nice quality of life stuff, like Demonic Circle always, has its soulburn effect. But, comparatively, while I think Mage has had some degenerate outcomes, not great outcomes from his hero talents, they've definitely satisfyingly like added on to the rotation in general. I think Frostfire with at least Isothermic Core and with Frostfire Bolt both feel pretty good for Frostfire, Frost, and Fire. And I think Sun Fury did some nice things for Fire and Arcane, though it's especially with next tier set getting a little bit ridiculous with the length of the stuff you have after your cooldowns. And Spellslinger is really the only one that's actually a letdown, but even as a letdown, it's still got enough things going on compared to some of the other hero talents in the game. Anyone else?
I love them personally. Like I play a lot of alts. I think Mage has the best hero trees, like by a good margin. I think a lot of the specs have like one decent one. Like Warlock Diabolist is like really fun. Stormkeeper Shaman is like really cool. Some of the other specs like Dark Ranger is like great. Mage I think is the only class that has 3 really good, like interesting, satisfying to look at, like interactive talents. The downside is they all feel like they're one change away from perfection kind of deal, which is the extra like frustrating part. Yeah, like I think Frostfire is like the most controversial one, where it's like it just feels kind of bad oftentimes that they're just barely like always missing the mark on like what actually feels satisfying. But as a whole, I would say that the hero trees are pretty good.
If you ever want to be grateful for Mage, just go play Rogue.
Yeah.
I love my Rogue. My Rogue is my favorite alt. The hero talents are dog shit.
Yeah, I'm much in the same boat. I think gameplay wise, our hero talents pretty much slap. I think they've done a pretty good job with them all expansion. I think the Spellfrost teachings change coming up is gonna wound Spellslinger for Arcane for me quite a bit more than it probably should, but it's just one of the things that made me fall in love with Spellslinger. I think in a general sense, like mages are fine with this, but I think hero talents in a much broader sense for me, they're cool aesthetically, but I don't know that they really hit the spot. I think most specs in the game are only playing one of them. I think most people only like one of them. I think it's just and there's definitely some complexity bloat and calculation bloat that's come from hero talents, especially talents like Sun Fury and Frostfire and Spellslinger, the mage ones, where every spell we cast has a bunch of trickled in effects that come in from the hero talents that are really just making it complex for no reason. And so in a way, like I'm really happy that we didn't personally as a class get screwed over by hero talents. Or that they're not super boring like the rogue ones, right? But I definitely worry that like it's just complexity for complexity's sake, and that they could have potentially done a better job focusing the time they spent developing those on developing the actual spec trees and solidifying the identity and tuning problems that already existed there.
And
I think like a lot of our discussion today is kind of really focused on those spec trees because that's where a lot of our problems are. So yeah, I think for Frost and Fire especially that like I would have rather seen those trees cleaned up and perfected than adding more on top of them.
I think something that can't be understated as well is kind of the complexity added to research, right? In addition to all the different variations you have. Now, if someone wants to go look into the research for their spec and you open SimC and like for Frost, you see, okay, there's 3 different action lists for each of the hero talents. You're like, my God, what am I looking at? So that's definitely been a downside of hero talents, at least.
For sure. What do you think, Azuna?
I actually think it just brings a crazy, like, problematic balancing issue. But I mean, because like I feel like Frostfire Fire got kind of shot down because of the strength of Sunfury. But I mean, all the hero talents have been really awesome. I actually think they all are beautiful too. Like Spellslinger is visually beautiful. Frostfire is, the Sunfury, you get a little Phoenix. I think it's all been pretty good. Just I think the balancing is sometimes tough for like Frostfire Fire.
I would have loved to see them take another expansion with just the base talent trees to really work out the kinks in those, because we're still getting reworks. Like Frost DK Unholy just got like massive changes. I would have loved to see
Frost Mage.
I would have loved to see another expansion where they just really solidify these new talent trees and work out the kinks in those before they added this double layer of complexity on top. And I feel like for Mage, all of them have been doing pretty good, with the exception of Spellslinger. I think they have continually regressed on how that feels to play. Specifically looking back at Season 1 Frost, I loved the Gamba Orbs. I thought that was some of the most fun I've had on Frost. And segue into Arcane, I'm not a big proponent of what they've done to Spellfrost teachings for Machine Gun Orb. Porom, if you want to dive into what they actually did.
Yeah, so they changed Spellfrost teachings from a random chance on splinter hits to generate an arcane orb that just slings out at your target free of charge. And now it just, every splinter gives you a little bit of cooldown reduction on arcane orb. And we all love cooldown reduction after today, right? Personally, for me, it's a huge punch in the gut for this hero tree for Arcane, because during beta, one of the major issues with Splinter Slinger, as we were calling it back then, was that it was just kind of boring, uninteractive, and a lot of it just came down to calculation bloat in your combat log. Splinters at that time were the aesthetic for them hadn't been fully developed. The graphic was a little weaker than it is now. But those random chance orbs coming out, like, just made the spec really feel much more interactive. You could sling out barrages between them and leverage the random charge regeneration you were getting. And then on top of it, when they added it, there was a developer note about how Spellslinger was really boring and kind of agnostic of any identity for Arcane. And that note, that change is what addressed that for me, right? And that was like a huge thing that made Spellslinger Arcane popular at the time. And I definitely fear without that, the spec just feels slower, feels a bit more sluggish. You have to cast every orb. Orb doesn't really do much damage on its own. It's mostly what's it called? A resource generator more than anything. They did buff its damage a bit, but like, it's not like it's ever going to compete with Barrage with Resonance or anything like that, right? It's never going to be a significant amount of your damage. On top of that, we're losing time anomaly clear casting procs, which is a small amount of our clear casting procs in total. I think it was something like 3 to 5 on average in a 5-minute sim. But we're also losing the tier set from Liberation of Undermine. And currently, Spellslinger's getting about like 60% of the clear castings that Sun Fury is. And it feels bad because of it. Like, I don't know how much how much time you guys have spent on PTR messing around with all the specs and stuff. I'm sure it's been plenty just like me. But I don't know how you guys feel about those changes, but I just freaking hate them. I love Spellslinger's design. I hated a little bit of the barrage complexity that was caused by its design. But I feel like the gameplay made up for it. It felt really smooth, and everything kind of fell in on itself and created a maelstrom of these random procs that eventually added to a real stable kind of profile.
Just to say, Frost kind of has a bit of the same problem with proc distinction between its hero talent specs. Before they reduced excess fire to 50%, Frost fired 80% more flurries in 5 minutes, and now it's probably more like 40%. I don't know the number. But I think one of the failings that's had for Spellslinger is because to make up for that proc deficiency, they tend to just funnel a bunch of your damage into splinters, and that has its own problem, and I don't think that's very satisfying. I'm a proponent for no auto sent orbs as Arcane, mainly because whenever I was doing like Onsrek and like I'm strafing so I can keep casting and get to my poison puddle or whatever, and then oh wow, look at that, an Arcane orb just shot out of me, even though I'm kind of staring at the boss, it's still going off the edge. So I didn't really like that, but I mean Spellslinger does feel like a bit of a nothing hero talent now. So
yeah, I really would have liked it if they made it so that the orb went towards your target rather than the way you were facing. It was a bit more controllable with how you were facing, but it created issues, like you said, on Ansarek. I was like S-keying around and shit. You know what I mean? People were like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? Is he 100 years old? Why is he S-keying? And I'm like, because if I don't, my orb's going to sling out over in that direction, and I'm going to be really upset when that happens. I think a lot of people have proposed that it be a choice node in that regard. I think the biggest solutions are make it go towards the target. Don't let it pull mobs out of combat. I think the mobs out of combat was the big lightning rod that got it changed. And I think it's probably going to be for the worst from a gameplay perspective.
I mean, the thing with the orb
Yeah.
out of combat thing is like you still have orb barrage, to be fair. So it's like I think they need to do that regardless of the SFT change, because like your orb barrages are still gonna pull, no change on that end. I will say I am actually a fan of both the changes. I 100% agree with the sluggish thing that you noted with Arcane. I think I like the change a lot more for Frost because their cooldown is a lot longer, right? So it just doesn't feel like as bad. Whereas like Arcane, like I noticed you're playing it and it's like you, especially in Surge, you're getting an orb back like 4 barrages and 3 barrages, and you get it back so fast. It's unreal. I do like that the fact that it acts as like more frequent bad luck protection against like orb barrages that you actually have control over. So I was wondering, like, with the orb travel change that they did, like it travels 70% faster, right? Would it be viable for them to make it so that when you press orb, the global cooldown incurred is much lower? Because they've done that with numerous other spells in the game. Like I think they did that in 11.2 with aim shot, because their aim shot cast power is like 0.3 seconds. So you press it and then it's like you have to wait till you press your next global. I think they've done that with some other spells. I wonder if orb could get that kind of treatment as well, especially because like Arcane is not super fast if you take off SFT. Like if you talk about like that maelstrom of chaos where you're just like machine gunning orb, maybe reducing the global on orb itself could fix some of these issues. But then maybe I don't know if the travel time would have to be good enough to make that not like, oh, I'm gonna orb and then barrage is still on 0 charges, right? That would be bad. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's an interesting one. I think I've also heard people talk about making it OGCD and cast while casting, kind of like Fire Blast, right? I don't think either of those ideas are really that bad in that regard. I do think, like, I also think you could just buff orbs damage, to be honest. If it were worth the global from a damage perspective, it would feel so much better to hit than it is now, where it's like, it's a really cool spell. It just, it's like Scorch. It does piss damage, and you just don't care about that, right? You want the 4 charges, and you're done with it. obviously with the tier set, you get some harmony from it. You're getting splinter generation from it, so it still has good synergy through the hero tree and the talent tree, but yeah, it's just not a good 1.5 second cooldown like spell, right?
Yeah.
And from a raid perspective, I'm kind of indifferent on whether the orb auto fires or not. From Mythic Plus, I actually kind of enjoyed it, and Azuna's going to crucify me for this. But I liked thinking about my positioning, like in Dawnbreaker or what's another, like Priory. I liked having to like be cognizant of where the patrols are or where I'm facing. I thought it added like a little bit of extra flavor, and I'm gonna miss that a bit.
I was never a fan of like there's like a couple things that sat wrong with me about like the arcane orb changes. One is like, have you ever like procced a spell slinger orb and then also sent the orb at the same time? That's like something that never really sat well with me, especially Mythic Plus. Or like even like the high variance of the damage sometimes is I guess the high variance of the damage in Arcane kind of frustrated me. Also, like, you know, Arcane also the variance is a lot into crits too, but like the variance definitely frustrates Mythic Plus players, I think. And I guess
funny.
What's up?
Sorry, Asuna, it's funny you mentioned that because the developer note when they changed Spellfrost mentioned the variance as well, but it actually increased Arcane's variance to remove
Really?
that
Okay,
and
yeah.
time yeah. What ends up
CSD.
happening is those things smoothed out variance because it was like another RNG layer towards the same effect, right? Of restoring your charges. It really totally unintuitive. I totally get why, you know what I mean? Why the gut would be like, oh yeah, this is gonna make it smoother and less bumps in the damage, but ultimately it just ended up not having that effect, which is really
That makes
interesting.
sense. It always did feel like I was in, like, I guess when I did keys on PTR, it did feel like I was a little more in control of my orb damage, where like sometimes I'm just like hammering barrages on live right now and just kind of praying sometimes. But like, I don't know, I kind of I like the change. I do kind of miss the live version though, because I was doing a PTR and it does feel good to just see 5 orbs out at once as Arcane. It's just kind of some little dopamine. I like that.
You install a weak core every time it procs, and then you're just cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh man, I'm in the casino right now. Like, this is a great time.
Yeah, if you change it to like a cat meowing, it just it sounds crazy. Like, it's nice.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna miss it, but I understand why they removed it. I think it'll probably be a well received change across the board. I think most people will like it. I personally like chaos. I like degen. I like always having to think about my positioning and facing. Although, to be fair, we'll still have a degree of that with Orb Barrage, right? That's still there, and that's still a random chance we'll have to consider and measure our range and direction of facing and stuff like that for.
I think it's gonna be also the fact that you can control when it's proc to stuff a barrage instead of like the Mistral clip where he just shimmers and then he fires an orb brand. Like that is just terrible, right? At least then it's like, okay, well, if I'm facing someone, I know not to barrage. Like I gotta be careful when I'm barraging. That's a bit more in control.
The
I'm
talent was
definitely...
Sorry, you go.
No, by all means.
I would say the talent was extremely hell and like Cinderbrew, like what Degen said about like the positioning, like, you know, my tanks are just pissed off at me for always pulling stuff. There's no way this is not happened to everyone and whoever's done keys, and that key is the biggest offender for the random pulling. So
the first room,
that was,
oh my god,
yeah, the
man.
first room, like the amount of yellow moms he pulls, like it kind of griefs the tanks, and they definitely freak out about it.
And like you find the position.
I pulled those on purpose.
The clip from Mistral where he was doing the Candle King and he turned and blinked out towards the stairs, and at the same time he turned, the orb launched and it just went down and pulled the skip pack.
You know, I've always thought like if that would ever happen, and it's never happened to me, but like the fact that someone did that just made me so happy. Like, I don't know, it was just so funny to me.
That happened to me on like a Cujo fight where like we were playing like, you know, where the entrance is, and like I'm shimmering out of the box, and I just so happened to be at the exact direction, and I barraged. So I fired an SFT orb at one pack, and then my barrage orb at the other pack. And then I procced 5 dogs into the ball. So okay, man, I guess the key is bricked.
New pool,
And then
new
you just
pool.
type in chat, fucking Moonkin, right? You know?
Dude,
That's good.
I was just like, oh guys, we have a problem, and like 4 dogs just walk into the pack, and like, guys, we proc some extra mobs. Instantly over. It's so bad.
Yeah, the Moonkin feels of this is Gallywix, because their Starfall would reach over to like the other peck of ads that's already spawned. I don't know how many times on Prog my Moonkins were like, oh, incoming. It's just the fucking
You know what-
next ads.
You know what's really funny about that one, Manather? If you play Spellslinger on Gallywix and you get too close to those mobs, splinters will randomly fire off at them. I had the same thing happen on Prague, because I was fucking around at Spellslinger and like just pulling random mobs from their things.
I had this note for Frost that we didn't end up talking about, but that fix for the Splinter Storm bug is really bad. Like if you look at Forge Master next tier, where you have the pylons are up, I think at a 99% damage reduction for a portion of the fight, and you're playing Spellslinger by the specs, and your splinters are going off and hitting those 99% damage reduction mobs. That's a pretty large loss to your damage with how much splinters contribute, and especially if hero talents are going to be evergreen and they really want to carry Spellslinger into next expansion, that kind of needs to be fixed for it not to be terrible on some raid fights for certainly no reason. And even when you look outside of the fact that it hits a 99% damage reduced mob, for Frost it's very important that it hits the primary target, because we need it to hit the mob that has Winter's Chill on it so it can be shattered. Arcane doesn't really have as much of a concern there, maybe with Arcane Debilitation, but yeah, it's kind of terrible.
So
There's also been a bit of a roller coaster with the tier to segue here as well from the Spellslinger side of things, right? We had Harmony triggering Intuition when you hit 20 stacks, but 21 if it's missiles, right? Because if you hit 20 with missiles, it didn't count. Still doesn't. But then there was it started off a percent chance on splinters, then they made it 100%, and you got 2 from Arcane Blast, and that felt really good. You were getting intuitions in a competent amount of time in single target, and probably way too much in AoE. Let's be real, right? They nerfed it, they pulled back on it, and it's a bit more normalized in AoE. But the problem is now you very rarely hit that 20 harmony stack unless you're intentionally doing it in single target, which kind of feels a little bit bad. The good thing is that the intuition doesn't interact directly with the bad luck protection on intuition. And so, if you proc it from the set, it doesn't reset the bad luck. So you're still getting more intuitions overall, which is nice.
I'm going to move this towards Sun Fury, which it actually surprised me this tier how popular Sun Fury was in Raid, because the damage difference was pretty minor, but the mobility trade-off that you get between the two is pretty extreme. Sun Fury, outside of the Arcane Soul window, really has to kind of sit there and blast a lot more. Where with Slinger, you get those orb procs, you get those additional barrages, and you can kind of stutter step around a lot. But if you look at Warcraft logs, it's a pretty heavy lean towards Sun Fury. Which I was not expecting. And going into this next tier, the Sun Fury set, it's shared with Fire. So we get that extended Arcane Soul duration. And I haven't watched too much, but I've seen a lot of clips of people actually leaning towards Sun Fury and Mythic Plus, which again is very surprising to me because of the profile difference. Porom, you want to explain to me why I'm stupid?
I don't think you're stupid. I think when it comes to this tier, I probably misjudged a bit of Sun Fury's strength. I also wonder if there's not something going on there that is driving that a bit more behind the scenes that we haven't really figured out yet. Because on paper they pretty much do the same, right? And the disparity shouldn't be as high as it is in Raid that we see. I think a decent amount of it is partially just execute being a bit better timed on some of the fights for Sun Fury in that regard. I think that might be one impactor. When it comes to the next patch, though, I'm fully recommending Sun Fury for everything. It is crushing it in At least on paper, when it comes to multi-target, it's very much competitive with Slinger in most situations. And where it's not, it's pulling ahead in uncapped situations and falling a little bit behind in priority damage. But ultimately, it's Arcane, so the funnel is there regardless of which hero talent you pick. I think the really interesting thing about next patch in that regard is our capstone tree, or our capstone talents, are extremely well balanced compared to previous iterations of the game. Like in Dragonflight, in The War Within, in Shadowlands, BFA, Legion, I can't remember a point in time where we had as much build diversity as we're going to have in 11.2. You can pretty much pick 2 of the 3 major capstone lines, and you're good to go. It does not matter which, you know what I mean? So as long as you grab Harmony, as long as you grab Arcane Bombardment, you can pick, to either go down the Aether Attunement line, Magi Spark line, or the Ley Drinker line, and you're in good shape. A lot of that due to the rework of Savant, Mastery, and Resonance, which kind of weakened Barrage's influence on the multi-target rotation. And it's really interesting because Sun Fury right now is veering towards this crab build where like you take Aether Attunement and Ley Drinker and don't take Magi Spark, which was like completely unheard of a patch ago, right? Where Magi Spark was 13%. You know what I mean? It was like not even remotely close to the other capstone talents. So they've done we talked about how Fire and Frost are completely pigeonholed into these builds that, it's almost entirely dictated before the patch even begins. With Arcane, I'm not 100% sure which builds are going to be on top at the end of the day. It's going to come down to players and the environments and the fights. And there's going to be a lot of flexibility there. I'm really surprised to see people embracing Sun Fury in keys on beta. I think part of it might also be those higher keys where you can leverage a bit more of the soul window. I think the general public is probably going to be a little bit better off with Slinger in keys where you're doing like 10s and 12s and shit's dying in 12 seconds. You know what I mean? But this is the first time where we're going into a patch and I'm like not at all confident about what Arcane's going to look like at the end of the day. So, and I love it. I think that's a perfect outcome.
I can let you know when I'm going to make an Arcane guide so you can be confident 4 hours after.
Nice.
A lot of the mages on the PTR have stopped to playing only Sun Fury and keys. So like, is Sun Fury beating out Celsius in every single target here, like in Sims? Like, because everyone's
not every single target, but the thing is like Spellslinger is doing a nominal amount more priority damage, but like at every level, Sun Fury is doing better cleave and AoE.
Okay,
so a lot of that, yeah, and that's even after the bird nerfs that they did last time, after the Rezo nerfs, and a lot of it's because of this crab build, because you're leaning more on Arcane Blast and Arcane Missiles, which is like not the norm for us this expansion. So
that's Ley Drinker doing a lot of the work.
Yeah. Like 70% of your AB like cleaves 5 targets or something. It's absurd. Like it's so good.
Yeah, and then 100% of your missiles when you get AA, right? And it's just a lot of damage compared to like Arcane Barrage Cleave where it's 35%, right? Of the barrage hit is what gets distributed to other targets. At least I think it's 35. It's been a while since I looked at that number.
It's called crab build because it actually splits down each side of the talent tree and looks like a little crab.
It feels like Arcane's tier sets, this expansion have really led to pretty natural ways for its talent tree to be expanded. Like the Aether Attunement tier set this tier could be a great thing to go after that, with high voltage kind of moved somewhere more natural for it that isn't in quite as competitive of a slot, because it's a nice talent, but sometimes hard to justify, especially next year. And the Intuition one for Harmony, if it's bug fixed a little bit, could also be a good thing to kind of go after Harmony if they want to shake things up in the future.
So
somebody asked about the crab build. I just brought it up on screen here. So essentially you're taking all of the same normal talents that you would take today as Sun Fury. Oh wait, sorry, I'm not on PTR. That's what's wrong here. And so basically, you can swap Time Loop with Ley Drinker, and this is really going to be what I end up recommending, I think, for Mythic Plus builds.
That looks more like a crab to me.
Yeah, you got a nice little body here, and a couple of claws. That's where the crab build name comes from.
Yeah.
He's
It's
like
worth
two left
adding.
hands.
Yeah, it's worth adding. I'm still investigating some of this. I actually don't know if Sun Fury Execution is going to be part of this build or not. Right now, it looks like Saber might end up taking hold there, but it's something I'm not done working on yet. But that's the crab build.
Keeping us on Mythic Plus for a minute. So we'll call it Dragonflight. Arcane was very much not a Mythic Plus spec. You very rarely saw it played. And when Arcane is not played, it is not played. Like, it's not Frost where it has like that dedicated player base where it's always a couple thousand people. But since Dragonflight and really, really heavily this expansion, Arcane has been the GOAT. Is that healthy? Like,
The priority damage is I don't know. I don't think it's that healthy because it is kind of gapping on it, and then you just kind of always play around that. And then even if Arcane's not good, it'll still be OP. And then Mage just has the best utility, so it's always OP. So Mage in particular, and then Mage, and then plus Arcane. I feel like it's for high end key. It's kind of created an unhealthy meta, I think. But
Yeah,
I am glad to see it shine, though. I will say, after the few expansions it's gone through.
Yeah, I almost think that it's less the funnel because the funnel's always kind of been there. Like in Shadowlands, our funnel was pretty comparable to what it is now. It's a little worse, but they also just nerfed Resonance. Our funnel's already a little bit worse next patch than it was this patch. But the defensive power from Arcane is absolutely absurd in keys. Mass Barrier with Prismatic Barrier. I mentioned this yesterday on Max's stream. Like, that should not exist on a DPS. That level of group defensive utility is just blatantly too strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. It's really broken. Like, Mass Barrier is just like, it's just like to live like a one hit thing, because obviously the DR, the whole shield, because it's literally like a wall. Like, it's just the craziest raid cooldown on a 5-man, because barrier hits 5 people. So in a dungeon, it's even more OP than it is in raids. It's absurd.
Yeah, it would almost be better off if it didn't have the DR with Mass Barrier, right? And if
Yeah.
the DR was only your personal or something like that.
Then there's this fun interaction right now with a barrier diffusion, where if you mass barrier and everyone's pops, you immediately get your prismatic barrier back. So you can prismatic barrier yourself, it pops, press mass barrier, instantly get the CDR, and then you have another barrier. And then you can press shifting power and get barrier again.
It's actually something I do in keys. It's extremely nice because you just have 3 barriers that are all just 25% DRs.
You can live a lot with that, because that's also like rough, 2.5 mil per shield.
Yeah.
So that's pretty wild.
So yeah, I think that those things have all been pretty crazy. I think the Savant change and the Mastery fix, really, I think that really changed things for Sun Fury especially. That really opened up the tree. I'm super happy with those changes. Savant was on life support since Dragonflight. It has been consistently one of our worst capstone points that you can choose, sometimes being less than 0.5% at certain points. And so those fixes were completely needed, and it really hit right. So, like, super unhappy with Slinger Spellfrost Teachings rework, but super happy with the Spectre stuff. Almost the opposite of Fire and Frost. They also, real quick, they also bug fixed Intuition. You can now queue Blast into Barrage with Intuition. The biggest change ever for that spell, because that was a huge quality of life issue and it also created a massive headache in theory crafting as well for like trying to understand when to delay cast or when to blast or barrage, basically, right? So super happy with some of the changes they've done with Arcane this patch.
Um, we've been talking about a lot of positives from Arcane. I'm going to talk about something that I hate, and it's probably controversial. I miss Radiant Spark. Not necessarily the button itself. You could supplement it with Rune of Power or literally anything else. But what I really dislike is Big Burn feels great. You do this big setup, you Evo, Surge, Spark, do your thing. And that feels good because you have a lot of setup, you're building up, and then you kind of hit this window. Mini Burn, since the removal of ROP and Radiant, is kind of lacking that. And so you just kind of seamlessly transition, touch comes off, barrage, touch, barrage, whatever. And there's like no setup involved into it. So Mini just feels really lackluster to me. And I don't know what an easy fix for that would be.
I've got no freaking clue either. Honestly, like one of the problems is Magi Spark was supposed to be the complex choice node for our cooldown window, right? It was supposed to be Radiant Spark 2, and it's not. You passively accomplish the task without ever thinking about it in 99% of situations. And in AoE, you just blast after you touch, and that solves it too, right? And it's just like, yeah, they gutted the complexity out of our cooldown window, and I think part of what you're feeling is just like we've always historically had that, right? And they put it into our regular rotation, which worked great for Spellslinger as far as complexity and intrigue, but for Sun Fury, the rotation's just kind of boring, you know, for lack of better words. It's cool, there's things happening in it, and I think it's still fun, but I think as far as like intrigue goes, it's a really boring rotation, right? You only have 3 buttons you hit, and you hit them pretty much the same way every time under the same circumstances, and there's not a whole lot of variance there.
I'd take it a step farther and say the Surge Burn also suffers from the same issue. You know, Radiant Spark just shook up your rotation when you actually entered Burst, and now, you know, sure, I'm pressing Evo and Surge, but I'm just back to pressing exactly the same buttons I was before that, and it feels less satisfying for that reason. And I felt like with Radiant Spark and Rune of Power and Dragonflight, right, I felt really good when I was like, oh, let me like Evo or Radiant Spark, 3 Blast, Surge, Blast, Barrage, Touch. You know, I was like, that was pretty sick. And now, no, doesn't feel that way.
I sympathize with the problem because I agree, but also, like, the Radiant Spark existing in the way that it did created this like vicious cycle of like you apply Radiant Spark and then your 4 casts had to be blast, and if you had to move ever, it was over. Because if you missile, bye Spark, bye damage, you know, like, so then like you could say like, oh well, then they can blacklist missile, but then if you do that, you just missile blast missile blast still, right? Like nothing changes. So I agree. I just don't know. Like, I don't think Spark is gonna be a satisfying problem because it's just gonna create like other issues. I think it has to be like something else intrinsic to touch that wants like it creates variety in your gameplay in some way. For me, like personally, whenever I see that kind of thing, my answer is always just create some form of randomness involved. Whether that's like, you know, I don't know, when Touch of the Magi is applied, you get a random number of nether precisions when you like missile or some shit. I don't know, like something just has to be random to create variety in a boring, low spell count like rotation.
Maybe something like bumping up the intuition rate during touch windows,
right,
or something like that, right?
Right, just something to make some sort of variety happen in touch. For what it's worth, also, I always like plead to not underestimate the value of just numerical things. If touch did 40% damage and nothing else changed, I think you would enjoy mini more, right? Like it's not. I don't think it's purely like your rotation. I think it's actually like the feeling involved, the psychology behind it. Because right now, yeah, like I am. If I'm getting my Magi Spark off, I don't care about the rest of the touch. Like that's I'm good, you know. whatever happens, happens. Whereas if it was like 40% damage accumulation, it's like, okay, I care about this a lot more now. Yeah.
I definitely don't think Rain Spark would be a new solution. Just talking about the old problem, and Rain Spark also had issues for you. I remember when you got your rank 1 Sark parse, and you're like, oh, I was doing insane, and I go and I look at your parse, and it's your opener, the first 3 Arcane Blasts, the Surge, and the Barrage, and the Rain Spark all crit.
Yep.
It was just insane. But
Sark.
All right, so
Reported.
do y'all remember the Torghast power that made you do like a random sequence? Like,
yeah.
Make that into Spark.
I don't want to conjure food during my rotation.
You don't want to press
Not
rock
conjure food, but give you a random order. Like you need to press Barrage, then Missile, then whatever. But just like introduce, like Forgy said, some randomness to it. I think that would be cool.
100%. I like that idea. As long as you get like if it's gonna ask you to Barrage first, then it should be like a 4. Like if it's gonna refund your charges, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Or I guess it could be that your next barrage starts the sequence or something like that. Then you can like make a choice. But yeah.
I feel like that would be pretty fun. Like throw AE and a couple other spells in there and just kind of go nuts.
Arcane Explosion, the lost child of Arcane Mage.
I think I unbinded it.
No shot.
I think I did.
you're supposed to still use a spell slinger in AoE right now, so
I'm just playing Sun Fury right now.
exposed. Oh.
Yeah, I think I put Synapse on there.
Okay, something I wanna say, because this bugs me and I bring it up every time I try to talk about Arcane. Someone had put on here, are Arcane charges actually fun? And it's been a pet peeve of mine that Arcane charges increase both your damage and your cast speed of Arcane Blast currently. When back in like TBC and Wrath, those were the split options, right? In TBC, it increased the cast time as you got more charges, and in Wrath, it only increased the damage. And you've for so long been just absolutely doing everything you can to avoid casting Arcane Blast at like low charges, and it's not really healthy, and it doesn't really need to be that way. And so, should Arcane charges only increase the damage of the cast speed, and like which one would you choose?
Yeah.
Because I think both is unhealthy.
I put that there, and I kind of like want to mention like the other one about like what's the point of like mana in general.
Yes.
Like this thing Arcane has is like Arcane has historically been about like mana management in conjunction with like Arcane charge management. So like I remember back in MOP when it was retail, like a big thing was like, okay, how long can you stay at max charges before you have to like dump? And it was like this gamble, and you could do things like snapshot dot with like Nether Tempest to try and get more clear casting to try and stay at max charge. It was a gamble, and it was fun because you had to like do this management. Now it's just your perma up, like your mana is never an issue, your charges are never an issue. Why do these exist like at all? Like what is the actual? They don't do anything. The downside is like, or the further problem is that we've built our entire talent tree, especially like all the things that give you your charges back, based on that like decrepit system. So now it's like, okay, well, now you gotta get your charges back every time because high voltage gives you charges, intuition gives you charges, GI gives you charges. Like at some point, what are we doing? Just remove the charges. You know what I mean? Just make it like a proc. Like why cannot Barrage be like Missile is right now? Just make it proc, and like now I can cast it. Otherwise, I can't. At that point, right? Yeah.
Fire cares more about mana right now. Don't press spell steal more than 3 times.
I really think that Mana Adept is the problem in that regard. With the current version of Arcane, right? In Dragonflight, it wasn't an issue because we weren't using Barrage rotationally, but now that we are, having Mana Adept built into Barrage, it's really turned pathological in that regard. For those who don't know, Mana Adept is what gives you mana back when you Barrage. So Barrage clears your charges, which makes you spend less mana with Blast, and then it also restores mana. You could cut that equation in half by getting rid of Mana Adept out of it, and then probably make mana a significantly more relevant thing. But to that point, was it ever really an interesting thing? Because like when I look at previous versions of Arcane in Legion, there was definitely some mana management that paid off well, but like BFA, you just fought to stay above 80% the whole time. You'd never thought about mana outside of that unless you had Evo, and then you burn Doom, Evo'd, stay at 80%, right? Shadowlands kind of had a defunctory rotation where mana ended up not mattering, and Dragonflight it kind of came back, but ultimately Mana Adept was there as a tool to fight against that, to where like every time you would, get behind on mana, you barrage and then you're up 24% on mana, and it's like not a problem for another 5 minutes or whatever, right? But I do think the war within like hero talent design, including barrage as much as it does with Mana Adept, has been like a huge driver of that being no longer a factor.
What I really dislike with mana right now is, and this is partly player driven because we're the ones that come up with the rotations, but we evo and we build up our full mana, then we use surge, which dumps all our mana or portion of our mana, and then immediately recharges it back up. So like it feels kind of redundant in a way, because both of them are doing the same thing. It's just you don't really care about it. I would love for, this would be weird because surges right now is a damage window, but I would love for, you evo and then you burn down and then you hit that window of 350k mana or whatever it is, and then you surge. But it's just not realistic in the resource play right now.
Yeah, Siphon Storm was probably a mistake.
Right, like that's another thing. Like evocation is not even for mana anymore; it's just for Siphon Storm. Because if we could remove the entire like evocation spell and every effect of it, and then just press surge when you want to start your burst, and you would feel the exact same thing because you're just gonna regen your mana. Oh, my surge does like 200k less damage. Who cares, right? Like there's like that talent point that I don't know who the hell designed it, of like your surge does some amount more damage based on the mana. Surge does like 0 damage. Like, let's be real. Why is that?
Surging
there?
urge, man.
Yeah. It's just this whole issue of like the core resource of Arcane has completely disappeared, and that's why the rotation is so boring, because there's nothing you're playing around, right? One like criticism of mana has always been like, if something went bad, you cannot cast spells, which feels terrible. Right? That always. Then okay, it's like, well, we don't have to do mana. You can do the opposite resource. Maybe make it so that like, you when you cast like blasts or missiles, you generate some arcane power, and then when you barrage, you dump power, and then that's like, now you can have some other resource that you're like working towards. It creates variety in your rotation. Maybe you do some like building, and then when you pop your cooldowns, you're dumping barrages. Like if you think of like Demo Warlock back in the day, like with Metamorphosis, that's kind of what comes to mind. Something to create some base level resource management for Arcane would do so much for like their 2-3 spell kit, basically.
What I'm hearing is replace Evo and Siphon Storm with Rune of Power.
Could be like anything. Like they just need something, because the rotation is. When you explain it to someone, it's like, okay, you're gonna missile, blast, missile, blast, forever, and then when your weak aura tells you you're going to barrage, and that is like just like it's hellish to try to tell someone this is the video game you're playing, like.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I regret making. I regret making that aura. It definitely had a pretty significant impact on the community, and I apologize to everyone for that.
Apologize to my processor.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I think when it comes to Arcane, there's a lot of really exciting good things coming, but I do think that a lot of the core fundamental problems are all still there in that regard, right? Evo's aesthetic, essentially. The charges and mana don't really work as resources anymore, and haven't for a pretty long time, like since Shadowlands started, really. Yeah, there's definitely problems there, and I agree, Forgy, actually. I've had the same thought that they should just replace it with Maelstrom, right? You build up and spend, and rather than... And that would also alleviate a lot of the problems of like Arcane sharing mana formulas with healers, which has been a repeated issue as well. When they fuck with healer mana, it always ends up screwing up Arcane's mana generation and flow as well. As well as we're prone to getting those stupid trinkets that are like healer trinkets, essentially, right? Granted, there was one recently that was a bit more powerful than it should have been, probably the battery trinket from Mechagon, but But yeah, the fundamentals are kind of always going to be an issue with Arcane, I feel like, in that regard, because I think Blizzard sees them as like iconic parts of the spec. Same with Arcane Explosion. I've been asking for a decade now for Arcane Explosion to be castable on the target, right? Even an allied target would be better, right? I could make a focus macro on my tank, don't have to go into melee for half of my AoE rotation. That would be, in my opinion, pretty cool. Granted, they just got rid of Arcane Explosion, so that was their solution to that, right?
So the last thing I really wanted to talk about Arcane, clipping. What do we think about our current clipping meta with missiles?
I like clipping. I don't like having to do like rotational things that are not revolving around the GCD, because it just makes spell queuing like and those concerns like a nightmare. Like a great example is like if you play like Shadow Priest, when you know confidently that like when you channel a Mind Flay Insanity, for example, you can always clip it or not clip it, but like cue the next spell and you know you're gonna get the 4 ticks off. Fantastic. The moment you have to start channeling for longer than that, it's like, okay, you know, am I gonna interrupt this cast too early? Am I gonna lose a tick? Am I gonna have to worry about this stuff? With Harmony, like that still kind of exists when you like clip your missile a little too early if you're supposed to full channel, and then you get like 2 little charges, and it's like, oh well, I guess I lost a tick. That kind of gameplay is just outdated in my opinion. Obviously, no channel macros don't do anything to help that because of spell queue, but yeah.
What if it just matched the GCD? So your
I would be okay
missile
with
is
that.
the exact length.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be okay with me.
I mean,
I
I
think
just
that's the
don't
perfect
like
mix.
that with a bunch of haste. And I would like if they explored this more often. Maybe they don't because it makes things unbalanced, but where instead of reducing the cast time, it just increases the tick rate, you know? So when you're in Mega Lust and everything, when you cast Arcane Missiles, it's not that your missiles is done in 0.3 seconds. It has the same GCD cast time, but gets much more ticks. I think this used to be the case in WoD for Ray of Frost, which I would have liked for Ray Frost now as well, because you know it has that interaction where every time it ticks, it does 10% more damage, and that just makes it would just be funner to have the haste value there or haste steroids from trinkets. I think Arcane could get some value with it there as well. You know, Arcane Debilitation could just create like this massive burst window in Lust when you do it, but could be overpowered. So
Void Turret works like that for what it's worth right now, where the cast time is fixed, but the amount of ticks you get scales with haste. But the amount of damage it does scales off haste. So, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think either solution could really work. I think in general the community is less happy about clipping being a thing because it's like it's like a fundamental thing, right? That you have this proc, it should be powerful. You should want to full channel it, right? And you just don't because of channel lag essentially. It's super unintuitive, and I couldn't agree more that something needs to be done. I think there's a lot of options they could approach it with. One of the really interesting ones I thought about a while ago was like it's an instant cast and it puts a buff on you that fires out missiles at your target or something like that, right? There's a lot of approaches to this that solves the underlying issue, but ultimately, like, I'm not sure that they're going to do any of them because again, Arcane is one of those specs where it's like there are these really iconic WoW things in it, right? Arcane Missiles, Arcane Explosion, those are the 2 most iconic WoW Mage spells, really, when you think about it. And it's weird because to think of it that way because, you know, Frost and Fire tend to be the more popular specs. But I do think that Blizzard has they have certain lines they're not willing to cross. And I think Arcane Explosion and Missiles might be one of those lines. And so I really hope that they're at least willing to consider like lowering it to the GCD or something, because I really think that's like an easy solution that is inoffensive to people, doesn't change much of how the spell works or anything like that. And just in general, it would be really nice if they did something to where like I didn't have to tell people how to clip, right? People didn't have to ask how to clip. It was just like not a question at all. That would be an ideal state for sure.
100% agree. Yeah. They did the same thing with like, once again, Shadow Priest. Like Mind Flay Insanity used to be 1.5 GCDs, I think it was, or Maybe it was 2. But then they reduce it down to 1 GCD. Instantly, everything is fixed. Fantastic change. All W's, nobody complains. I don't see why it can't
3%
be
nerf
done.
to psychic.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't see why they can't do that with missiles. So yeah.
All right.
I had on
so-
here as well. Sorry. Well, I just
Well,
one more thing about missiles and Aether. I had on here as well. Like its cleave just feels very terrible, right? Like Gallywix, it's kind of rare for you to like cleave all 4 of the mobs when the 3 ads are on top of the boss or getting close to the boss. It just feels like you really can't utilize it as much as you want to. And obviously, what it had when it initially came about, where it was the 40-yard radius cleave, was a bit ridiculous. But I mean, hell, give us half of that. Like, give us 20, and I don't think that's ridiculous to say. Though that, I guess, gets a little bit into the spread cleave niche if you keep it at 20. So
I think
honestly, sorry, go ahead.
I say part of that issue, to be fair, is like how like cleaving works with like target hitboxes and stuff, right? Like with because you're cleaving off the center of the hitbox. If the boss is like really tall or really big, like if you miss out the ad, it would hit the boss, but if you miss out the boss, it doesn't hit the ad, kind of deal. That is like some core WoW thing that like is so bizarre to me, and like I don't know like why that is not like a big thing that they are like looking at, because it affects every spell. Barrage used to have to deal with this, right, way back before they changed it into like how it works now with chain lightning stuff.
Ignite's a big one.
Right. At least I think that's how it works. But correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
Honestly, that's exactly what I was going to say for you. The hitbox issue in WoW is the core fundamental issue with cleaving in general. It's like Eye of the Jailer, right? Is a good example of a boss that is the hitbox is a little high, and as a result, nothing cleaved except for like a handful of specs could cleave the angel above it. And like orb spells just didn't hit, right? They just fall off the cliff and they were gone. I don't remember if Frost did that, but I remember Arcane Orb just literally fell right off the edge, didn't hit the eye at all, nothing. And Nyalotha, N'Zoth is a good example, right? You could cleave Ignite off of N'Zoth on like anything in the whole map practically. But if you tried to cleave N'Zoth off an enemy, like if you hit a Psychus, it wouldn't go on to N'Zoth at all, right? Like those hitbox differences tend to be like where the rubber meets the road when it comes to all these cleave fundamental issues we have. And I think honestly, like we talk about Arcane's successes in M plus lately, I think a lot of that is juxtaposed against its failures in raid because of cleave functionality, right? Because it's way easier to get that functionality working correctly in an M plus situation where packs and bosses tend to be smaller just in general, right? Like occasionally you have a really big M plus mob or boss like in Rookery, but like the norm is generally the boss is relatively, player sized, and enemies in the pack are player sized, and they have hitboxes that are literally on the floor where they should be. And so yeah, I think that is a much broader WoW issue that like I wish to God they would focus the attention on, because it's definitely something that like players feel at every level of the game and are frustrated with it when it becomes a frustration. And then they're really happy when it's not a frustration, right? When you're like on the spider boss in Vault of the Incarnates, where Ignite hit every mob in the whole map, right?
That was perfectly balanced and fine.
Yeah.
I mean, someone
So
had
I
to
think-
humble the Boomkins. They're trying to starve all the tiny spiders.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, I usually tried to let the spiders kill them as much as possible. My Boomy is the punching bag of my guild, so that's how that goes.
Now I'm going to do everyone's favorite thing, and I'm going to make y'all predict what's going to be the play in Raid and in Mythic Plus. You got a spec and hero talent. Forgy, you want to kick us off?
I think that we'll be playing in Raid Sunfury Arcane for a lot of bosses. I think Frost will make a debut. Definitely not playing Fire. Yeah, I think Sunfury Arcane, because of the frequency of the damage amps, the timing of the damage amps, and somehow his arcane ability to just always appear, at least as of late. But I'm more hopeful for Frost now than ever before, so maybe it will show up. Keys, I'm not entirely sure. I would imagine it's probably still Arcane because of its like cooldown timings and how strong it is, especially with the new like just Arcane Blast gaming, you know, doing AoE damage and stuff. Yeah.
Manather.
I mean, I'm also I think Sunfury Arcane's gonna be the prog spec for Raid. I don't think there's like really any bosses where I would see you playing Frost just because of the one that would make the most sense probably is Fractalus. And I think you're going to be so far away on Fractalus that the range issues that Frost has might be prevalent enough that you just decide to play Arcane. And I think Dimensius is going to have similar issues. So I think Sunfury Arcane is probably going to be the raid prog spec. I will say, and I think it maybe surprised people this tier, right? Where when you look at like Worker Logs, you see Frost is like top mage spec of Gallywix on overall, or like Bandit, similar thing. I think Frost is going to be very, very good at that again, which is patting the shit out of bads. Especially Ford's Master is 100% an arcane boss, but someone's going to play Frost on it, and someone's going to double arcane's damage or something. So yeah, but I think it's a Sun Fury Arcane prog tier through and through, and I don't think M plus people are going to play anything but Sun Fury Arcane. Though I think Frost is kind of like okay, it's just there's better overall specs, so they're going to go for the prio damage.
All right, Billy, what do you think?
I think it's almost just Sunfury Arcane almost all the way. I could see a couple fights playing Frost. Like, I think some of I could see like second to last boss maybe playing Frost. I don't know, but I almost just think it's almost Sunfury Arcane the old way, and probably might just be a one mage tier for raid. Like, we also talked about. I don't know if we talked about like how Frost is kind of like unrealistic numbers and sims, or like that's like a topic. You know, a lot of Frost mages talk about, right? Like, maybe Manather has more words on that, but like Frost Sims seems kind of, sus sometimes, but and then when it comes to Mythic Plus, like I know I did some double mage keys with Kelt, if I said that wrong, but like even if Frost was to do a little bit more damage, you would still just bring Arcane because of the way it does its damage, right? Like it's just like the boss damage, you pull like 4 mobs on top of a boss, it wasn't even close. Like you just speed the key up so much. Like Mythic Plus, I think it's just a Sunfury Arcane the whole way. And I think Raid, yeah, Arcane's just gonna sneak its way in.
And Porom.
Unsurprisingly, I think Sun Fury Arcane's going to dominate Raid. I don't even think people are going to play Frost because the fights that Frost might be good on, I think, are mostly early bosses that are less important. And when it comes to Mythic Plus, I agree wholeheartedly with Billy, but I do think that there's a chance, depending on what the other DPS meta comps are, that you might take Frost for more, uncapped or snap AoE in certain situations. But I think it's much more likely that Sun Fury Arcane will be the prio spec that you bring, and you'll just pick your other meta DPS based on who can bring uncapped to complement that. So yeah, probably another Arcane tier. We haven't had one of those in a while, right, guys?
I guess going back to the whole prio thing, I think Sin Rogue is a spec that is doing insane in prio, and I think Shadow Priest is also doing insane in prio. These are like two really good specs and keys on PTR. So maybe if those two specs are like powerhouses, then maybe Frost could complement it with the more AoE, because I think Sin and Shadow do a lot of prio at the moment, as far as I know.
Warlocks are popping off in prio too right now. Don't let them sandbag and tell you lies.
I think
is Sin magic damage? Like, could it be a bit of a fizz versus?
It's
mage?
partially magic.
I think if the build, like right now, for example, Sin plays like a bleed build. So even though like they're like a poison theme, a lot of their damage is bleeds. I don't know if that's the same next year, but yeah.
And unsurprisingly, I think Sun Fury for both, but I do think within like the top 10, top 15 range, we will see some Frost kills. I think, someone who's really good on Frost can definitely make it work, like Gladrian or one of those other people that just do insane things on Frost. But I think for the bosses that matter, it's going to be Sun Fury all the way.
It is worth noting, Dimensius, the way it sounds is that the vulnerability that happens like right after like a scene or something like that you can't skip. And so Arcane might find a little hard footing to get that that burst window right, because I think it's only like 15 seconds. So there might be a bit of a struggle there. You might even like Evo before the cutscene, which is going to be fucking weird. But I could definitely see, I could see that being at least one hurdle for Arcane on the last boss, at least.
So what I'm hearing is Frostfire UI login. Surely.
Oh yeah, lock in. I will say, if Sun Fury Arcane is not the playing keys, I would be very surprised to see a mage in the meta. I don't think
kind of
that
agree.
I don't think that any of the other specs really bring anything that unique enough. Like Frost does, some AoE damage, but it doesn't do it better than anyone else. Fire, Blizzard hates fire. I just think if it's not Arcane, it's not going to be a mage key.
Yeah,
I don't see an M plus meta without a mage, to be honest. Not in the current state of things. We have too many stops, mass barriers, completely overpowered. It's really hard to see a future without mage in the M plus meta.
Yeah, I was actually watching I was watching a group today. They were playing with an Ellie shaman, and then they died, and they were like, "Oh, this is normally where we mass barrier." And I was like, is she?
If only they had
shaman doesn't have shit. Yeah.
Yeah,
I just think Mage will sneak. I mean, Mage is always competing with other less classes like Hunter, Evoker, Shaman, and people say Enhance is bad. So like, Enhance is usually the one that would dethrone Mage from that lust spot typically. But if Enhance is bad, so then it's like,
I mean, Elemental
Mage probably sneaks this way.
Elemental looks cracked as fuck.
Yeah,
and like
it does. But
yeah,
Elemental is low-key miserable to play with. Like that, I hate that 3-minute build so much. Like they just like like if you try to pop a cooler on top of a 3-minute Ellie, they will just steal all the damage, and then they'll do less than tank damage the next pull, and it's just like it's so crazy. But yeah, I mean, Ellie's definitely good.
Porom, Brew, Rogue. What else we got? What's the powerful melee boys? Mistweaver looked pretty good.
Hunter. It's not all melee, it's just physical.
I don't see a world where you're not playing a Shadow Priest. 40% Psychic Link. 40. That's the highest it's ever been. And they
I heard Feral Druid's looking really good too.
I heard Feral's really stonks up.
Dude, imagine a season with Feral being the meta. I can't, but we'll see.
All three of them, meta.
Hear me out. Never heard of comp. Mage, Shadow Priest, Augment, Evoker. Never ever seen that before.
So bold there for me.
Wait. So Og with Arcane. Ew.
Yeah, it's not the greatest combo, but it still works, honestly.
Well, Og has CDR if you play Scale Commander. They could very well match.
Yeah, give me those orbs. Let's fucking go.
No, like CDR on their Breath of the Eons, I mean. Like they can get their breath down to like a minute and something. You could easily line it up with Surge, I feel like. So,
I think with those orbs, you can also get Arcane to a minute as well. If they play right, it's a little RNG though, right?
I've never played an Augment Evoker, so like I don't know for sure, but yeah, very likely.
Hate lizards.
Yeah.
Porom, one thing that you said that I wanted to mention was you talked a little bit about like uncapped and getting there from Arcane, that being kind of a stepping point off. And kind of in my experience looking at like Sims, most of like the 5 to 10 target range is just Fire and Frost trying to catch up to Arcane from where it was at 5 target, and then that ends up happening at like 9 or 10. They catch up to Arcane, and then after that they don't really get anything because they're soft capped at 8. So there's like this disbalance of target caps, I think, which, I mean, how strong Arcane is at 5 target is a good thing. It's just, I think Fire and Frost have too little value in mass AoE to make up for the fact that they're so far behind in 5 target.
Keep in mind though that the number on the sim is not representative to the spread of the damage. Like you look at current sims, Arcane is the strongest AoE, but when you go into like a key like Priory where you want like the shitter mobs to die, you're not playing Arcane, right? Like you're playing Fire, because you need like shitter AoE basically, right? Whereas Arcane is very much, I am going to kill this one guy, but still do really high overall.
Yeah.
All I'm hearing is buff Frostfire Fire.
Amen.
Frostfire Fire UI. 90% damage.
No,
let's get it.
is good. SKB is good.
Let's be real, Degen. If we're strong in one area, let's just buff that area and make Mage meta, right? Like,
especially if it's Arcane.
I play World 200. I don't give a fuck about a meta.
All right, guys. Do you guys anything else you guys want to talk about before we open up maybe to chat for some questions? If you guys want to ask anything, please throw it in chat. You've got an opportunity here to get 5 yappers yapping. I definitely want to shout out here that Autumn is absolutely broken for Fire, which is a little crazy because Fire is broken bad right now, but if they do buff it, especially as they have been doing every like 3 weeks or so through the tier, they've been doing buffs, and so it's very possible that this could be a tier in reverse of Liberation of Undermine, right? Where we start as Arcane and then end up playing something else because of mid-tier tuning.
All Fire needs is 2 externals. Give them to me.
Yep.
Ignore the fact that the Evoker is going to do 15% more damage without it, and just give it to me.
I always feel like fire sims on logs are always just skewed by PI. What do you guys think?
Oh yeah, this
Yeah,
season
definitely.
especially.
Yeah, like I feel like it makes it look better than it actually is.
I mean, it's just epidemic. Like, I hate that, Like, I mean, maybe I'm just saying that as someone who, played Fire for a lot of prog, and the other mage was getting PI, and I wasn't, but that's just kind of terrible.
I think it's most
Yeah, I
frustrating
hate
because
PI.
it's CDR as well, not just damage, right? Like you get access to different profiles when you're getting PI versus when you don't, which is especially problematic.
So we got a question here. Each of us, if we could change one thing about each mage spec, what would it be? So let's just, to make it a little succinct here, let's just pick one mage spec, one change. Degen, what do you change?
Fire burst.
Forgy?
Like granting hot streak on casts and stuff, not on landing.
Manather?
Oh, that's terrible. Then I guess all shattering on Fingers Frost.
Billy?
This is a weird one. I would actually like if high voltage was like little like less RNG. But obviously it's a talent that we don't probably play, but like you know how sometimes you send an empowered either to missiles and you get 1 charge on single
Yep.
target? Like, I never was a fan of that. I don't know how you guys feel, but
No, I think that's a good one. I would not mind it at all if high voltage always did 2 charges or something like.
yeah, exactly.
I think it was in Legion or something like that where we always got a charge from using missiles or something. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but I do remember a period in time where we always got a charge from using missiles, which was pretty nice.
Mop does that for sure.
Okay. I would definitely make Arcane Explosion interact with hero talents. I think that is something really detrimental to Arcane.
You want that more than it being ranged? I mean, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Let's fix the problems we can. Let's see here. If we can make each mage spec have their own hyper-specific niche, what would that be? I think that's a good one. I think from my perspective, I think Arcane already has all the niches it needs. I think it could give Execute back to Fire. I think we all agreed on that. I think Frost really needs to be the spread cleave option. I think that would really open up Frost's relevance in meta to a point where we can look at a fight and all 3 specs be balanced the same and say, hey, Fire's the right spec because I need Execute here. Arcane's the right spec because I need Funnel here. Frost's the right spec here because the mobs are too far apart, right? And stuff like that. Like Council of Dreams or whatever it was in Amir Drasil would have been a clear Frost fight if that had been the case, and it probably was anyways, but it would be nice to have those clear niches. What do you guys think?
I think they just never design anything that's really close to target anymore. It's always, you look at the current council fight, some guy's always leaping around. It's always 3 target nowadays, even if it's not, people are always leaping around and stuff. So I think Frost 2 target isn't functional anymore. Spread cleave is really the only way to preserve it, and I think that the way that you can add spread cleave to the class would functionally change almost nothing about how it plays, but make it stronger, give it more of a presence in raid, and still be satisfying. It's almost like a pseudo psychic link where you treat Splane Ice as your multi-target hitting, and you cap it much lower, and then you're able to fit that niche. And it has positives, right? One of the main things that people don't really like about Boomkins, about Shadow Priests, about Affliction Warlocks as they end up getting over nerfed because of their capability to do spread cleave. But the more classes you have with that capability, the less that each of them needs to be weaker individually, because you don't need to like bring 5 warlocks to one fight. You know, if you have a variety of classes, you can mismatch it and make it work. So
that reminds me of the fact that we got mass teleport in the spell data, but they never implemented it. So that there would be a gateway alternative. I think that they should revisit that idea and make sure they
probably
make
not for
it right.
Mage. Probably not for Mage though.
We probably
I
have too much.
I do think it's a little criminal that Mass Invis is just never used, to be honest. But at least it's there, I guess. So
Yeah. This one I'll direct at Billy because I think you're probably the best equipped for it. What race do you go on as Mage next tier? Do you think it's another dwarf tier?
I would say it's a dwarf tier because in my experience, they've added a lot of magic debuffs, right? Like Halls of Atonement is just like so much magic debuffs, and like maybe Priory or like playing the bleed guys, the knights, whatever they're called. The way I've seen it, the only dungeon I feel like, yeah, like Arakar, like you said, there's like infinite bleeds, poisons. Like you just died as if you don't have dwarf. Like dwarf is the difference of like pressing ice cold or not, and so it's like that just makes it insane. Like
I mean,
this tier is kind of the same thing where like night elf is the difference of pressing greater invis or cold, but like I think the only dungeon night elf is inherently like superior is Priory maybe, but like every other dungeon just feels like a dwarf dungeon. And I'm not proud to say that at all because I've been dwarf for so long, but yeah, I
They're
think it's just
so
gonna be
ugly.
dwarf. Yeah, it's like you kind of just give up on your transmog almost is the way I feel, or just spam toys.
I mean, the thing
I
is,
wish
it,
that
it has to be dwarf, no? Because there's meld pot now. Like everything you need to meld, you just pot it.
Yeah, that's
Yup.
true.
Double
I
the
just
Do you
waste my
ever
GMviz.
do you ever consider the races that have like a percentage reduction on debuffs? So like Mag'har Orc, for example, they're actually one of the stronger DPS racials now. And I think it's like 10% less time on curses, poisons, and bleeds, if I
Really, I
remember
actually did not
correctly.
know that at all.
Yeah,
I
so it
actually didn't
actually
know that
what ends
part.
up happening when you have duration reduction like that is you end up losing the last tick of things. And it
That's not
happens all the
bad.
time when you use prismatic barrier on magic debuffs that
Oh
it
yeah.
works on because a bunch of them are whitelisted and don't work on it for some reason. Um, but I'm just curious what your thought on that is.
Usually like I said, if a racial the defensive part is the difference of pressing ice cold or invis, then usually that just like makes it way more insane. So I mean, I could see it good in certain dungeons, but sometimes like for example, Lisa, like it gets rid of like poisons and curses. Like sometimes like a dwarf in that scenario might just be more OP. Like as sad as that is to say. So
especially when you have things like the Arcane poison next year that stack, right? So when you
yeah.
randomly get 3 stacks
Yeah,
and
it
you
like refreshes over and over and over. So like
God, I
Fill
don't
my
miss
bar.
that.
yeah, it's bad. Like you actually need like a poison spell, and
I I do
dwarf
not
is
know
just
why. Sorry, Billy. I don't know why people voted Arakara though. I
I
did not want that dungeon back.
all the voted dungeons are ass. Sorry my language, but they are just so bad. Like oh my
I
god,
I feel like Dawnbreaker isn't that bad. It was a pretty
Dawnbreaker's
easy
awful.
dungeon.
I just don't like how like you press frozen orb or like arcane orb, and it just goes like to the right or left of you on the boats, and
Yeah.
like I'm just like bro, like and then like priority is an actual heart attack when you're like in high key because you have to like spam 10 AoE stops in a row. Like the whole gimmick of priority is you pretty much you get 2 AoE stops in one pull. That just sounds crazy to me. Like you press beam, you press mage stops, and then you make it to the second beam in the same pull. And like the whole time you're just like this next, this next, this next. It's crazy.
All right, let's do
Hectic.
2 more questions here. So what's the single best or coolest mage ability that we have? Let's go around the room here. Billy, let's start with you.
Does it have to be this expansion?
I'd say no. Fuck it.
Mop all third time is so freaking cool. Like god damn, that thing is so cool. Okay, yep.
All right, Manather, what do you think?
I really like Comet Storm, to be honest. It's visually just amazing and it has nice interactions with Shatter.
All right, Forgy.
maybe not a surprise. I fucking love SKB. I think that is the ever
Zen
since
ability.
yeah. Well, I mean, kind of right. It's like hard cast pyro, and then like I mean, yeah. I think it's just like the fact that it introduces like flat damage profile. It was pretty unique when it first came out, and then also like it's just reinventing a spell that you never used to like cast hard cast, and then suddenly it's like the most satisfying one, and it gives you. This is so sick. I love SKB so much.
How about you, Degen?
Illusion, specifically when your holy priest dies and you press illusion and you have the macro that just laughs at them. That's the most important ability we have.
I did that on Galley a couple weeks ago, and doing the little spin around thing with mirror images up and a bunch of giant angels taking up the screen was pretty entertaining. I think for me, and this is crazy to think about, but I'm kind of torn between Mark of Aluneth and Arcanosphere. I really like Arcanosphere. It's one of the
Arcano's
most
really cool.
fun PvP abilities I've ever played with. It looks really cool, and it's also unique in how it works. It has it's similar to Evoker's Charge Up, but it's actually a channel spell, and yeah, it's just a really cool ability.
I love world PvP with Arcano and going bowling on cliffs. Yeah, that's a good time.
They
The
honestly
best
cooked
is
in Dragonflight because they had Ring of Fire, Ice Wall, and Arcanosphere added, right? Which was bangers.
for sure. Yeah, Dragonflight PvP mage adjustments were awesome for sure. I really like Arcanosphere. If you hit someone, you mentioned throwing them off cliffs. The really funny thing is if you hit them up a hill, it'll hit them multiple times and can usually one-shot people if you catch them at the right angle. It's really hilarious. Okay, so let's see here. What do we have? One more. Do you guys see one you like?
There's if you could make a tier set baseline,
Oh, yeah.
which one would it be?
I love that one. Let's do that. Degen,
Sure.
let's start with you. We'll go back in reverse here.
Repeat it. If you can create a tier set on what?
If you could make a tier set baseline, which one would it be?
Tier set baseline. The one we just had where it made combustion a cooldown a little bit. Yeah.
What do you think, Forgy? All of your stuff gets baked in already, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like all my nice tier sets have already been baked in, so it's like it's kind of hard to choose from. I think I really enjoyed the touch of the Magi into Aether. I do really like that. It felt pretty satisfying to like it just gave a bit more oomph to the cooldown, just gave it a bit more meaning. Yeah.
Mana?
So, I mean, there's obviously the AoE Glacial Spike one, but I'm not going to choose that. I really liked the Sepulcher Frost tier set, the one where it had an ICD, but essentially every 20 seconds you would call down a Comet Storm, and Comet Storm then had like a damage debuff they turned into Numbing Blast. But that was sick because you would just like go into AoE, and essentially your first spell would always trigger it, and then you would just immediately shatter it. So like you would go into a pack, press Orb, and then immediately like Ice Nova, and it would shatter your Comet Storm, and that felt really good.
Awesome. What about you, Billy?
I played Arcane on PTR. Losing that Aether attunement on touch just like leaves an empty hole within me. So like I hate to say the same thing, but like that it has to be that one. Like it feels bad to press touch sometimes. Like the mini burn feels really bad now without the Aether attunement thing, in my opinion at least.
For sure. I think Magi Spark with Mini as well is really difficult to guarantee now, especially for Slinger, where you get less CC to begin with, right?
I've definitely missed the whole Magic Spark sometimes on like PTR, just like I guess like especially when it was like the intuition like spam build, like whatever before the nerf, where you just barrage, like something was just wouldn't even get a missiles ever.
Yeah.
Would just
I was gonna pick the same exact one, honestly. I really like Liberation of Undermine's tier set for Arcane. The jackpot part, I don't care about. Just give me Aether Attunement and clear casting when I hit Totem. That's all I want. All right. I think we've nailed it, guys. What do you think?
Hell yeah.
I think it's been a great little podcast here. I had a lot of fun. You guys all rock.
I even learned a lot too, so like I like this. This is good.
We have successfully yapped.
Yeah. We went well beyond the time we planned for. So I let's get the hell out of here. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Yes.
I'll definitely try to do this again in the future. Hopefully, when we have some midnight beta stuff to talk about, and there's some mage changes that are interesting. Maybe we'll get this gang back together if you guys are all interested, and I'm sure the masses love it. So, all right, guys, thank you very much.
Take care, everyone. Bye. Oof. That was 4 hours and 3 hours and 45 minutes? Almost 4 hours. Wow. Alright. GG's everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna try and upload this to YouTube, but no promises. We'll see. Yeah. Peace.